like to call this Governance and Priorities Committee to order. Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 11th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I'd like to recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurry. We have the following councillors in attendance electronically. Councillor Brown. Today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018-7272. If during the meeting any member from the gallery has a question on a matter that was considered by the committee today, please sign up on the sheet located at the table by the double doors on my left. Please note that Council Procedure Bylaw states questions will be only taken on staff reports or other business items. Got a nice little blurb here about decorum, but I assume that everybody will be well behaved. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. And Ms. Gurry?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For late items today, we have the replacement of agenda materials for the Health and Housing Action Plan, progress, update, and funding options, so just replace those materials, and the addition of documents and presentations submitted by Bob Moss, member, Keith Wilson, member of Housing Working Group, Colin Stansfield, Chief Executive Officer, Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, and Levin Calawart, Principal, Anchor Corporation. So those have been added to the addendum on Friday, and that's it, Chair.
Great. Can we get a motion on the agenda as amended? It's moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Eastmere. Questions? All in favor? Motion carried. And a motion for the adoption of the minutes as circulated for the January 26th meeting. Moved by Krog, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. All in favor? Motion carried. That brings us to agenda planning, upcoming topics and initiatives. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair. So in front of you on pages 9 and 10 of your original agenda, we have the upcoming topics and initiatives. So the first several, sorry, I'm getting some feedback here, have been approved by Council. And if you go to the page 2, there's tentative topics that I'm looking for approval from you today, and that's the transportation update. This was noted at the last GPC, asking when these items would be coming forward. So if we get council approval on that, we are looking to schedule that for July 13th GPC. As well, after this, I believe there is a topic that Councillor Armstrong plans to bring forward for you all to consider as well.
So here we go.
Oh no, this is to bring my own. I'll wait. Thank you. Through you to staff on the July 13th transportation update. Always happy to receive that. Could I get a little bit more information about what that will contain? Will that be transit exchange information? I'm just curious. The rationale is that topic was inquired about by individual council members without a motion. I'd just like to know what we're going to be discussing in a transportation update at a GPC.
Before I turn to Mr. Rosen, I think at the last GPC there was several councillors inquiring about decisions made on transportation initiatives and those types of things occurring around the city that were possibly going to be addressed. Other than that, I'll turn it to Mr. Rosen, and perhaps he has some more information on that.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry, through the chair. So the transportation update it's a topic that we often come to council periodically and provide a bit of an update. This particular one was triggered by some recent intersection construction that caused quite a few complaints within the city, and so it's an opportunity for us to kind of walk council through how some of these decisions are made and how they're based on a lot of existing policy. So it's an opportunity to kind of walk council through how those decisions are made and so on and so forth. So that was the intent of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I remember expressing some questions or concerns about our transportation policy overall to do with intersections and traffic flow, and wasn't sure of the venue for that discussion to happen. And Mr. Sims suggested that staff would be bringing forward some type of discussion or report at a future date. So I think that's what that refers to. I did not make a formal motion. I don't know if it's needed.
I think if it's something that we wanted to go forward, this is the opportunity to do so. If it's something that you'd like an update on and what staff have provided the rationale is sufficient.
Seems good.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Thorpe, yes, this is where we would need a motion from you to bring this forward to the meeting. So if you would like to do that, this would be the time.
Sure. Then if I may, Chair, I'll make a motion that we hear from staff with at least a verbal report on transportation guidelines and philosophy to do with traffic flow and recent intersection decisions, I guess I could put it that way, and a general review of our policies.
Second by Councillor Perino. Any questions, discussion? None, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Great. Councillor Armstrong.
I would like to make a motion to have a special GPC commencing at 6:30 p.m. to talk about the need for dry housing in Nanaimo, and it would be a panel forum with different community members being involved.
Okay, great, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion, questions? Councillor Perino.
Sorry, Chair, just a very quick question. When are we thinking about doing this?
I was hoping we could look at June 8th, because I'm the only one going to FCM and I'll be back. And I just want to say one of the reasons I'm doing this, it's in response to Minister Boyle's letter to us as well as to communities that she does not believe dry housing is needed. So I just want to show that I believe there's a need in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Great.
Chair, I'm opposed. Just
Oh, Councillor
registering
Brown is opposed. Okay, motion carried. Sorry, I didn't see you there. That brings us to the next items on the agenda, which is reports, Green Nanaimo, and water supply, capital improvements, and operational resiliency efforts. And Mr. Squire, Manager of Water Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm always happy to talk about water, and it's an abundant supply that we currently do have, and it is obviously our most precious natural resource that we have. I like to just start by looking back at a little bit of history, and it's very hard to believe just over 10 years ago, our main water supply was our old reservoir number 1 depicted in the bottom left-hand corner. Just over 10 years ago, we delivered raw water to that, simply added chlorine in behind a fence compound adjacent to our road network. So with advancements, and this was part of the 2007, I believe, water supply strategic plan, which basically addressed main focus was on water quality improvements, and which we've accomplished out the South Fork Water Treatment Plant. And over the last 10 years, we've easily accounted for more than 100 boil water advisories deferred because of the result of water treatment. So moving on to our current water supply strategy, we like to do these in line with official community plans, and with city plan, it was a complementary document that we looked at. And always we look at, it's not we will build it, they will come, it's more the inverse of that. It's what the community envisions for that, what is the populations, and how we can purvey water to those areas that the development or future growth is going to be happening. What we found with the review of the plan is we're using far less water than we previously been doing. Over 30 years ago, we're using the same amount of water, yet we have a population of 50,000 more. One of the other recommendations that we're looking at for the water supply strategy is add a secondary intake at the South Fork Dam, do some seismic upgrades because it's only water supply intake, build further redundancy in our system, build resiliency in our water system, and obviously update our emergency plans. To give you an example of that, the Midtown project, you've heard probably a lot about this project. It was a very encumbering capital plan that we looked at. We had three main risks. The main risk was the water main that basically ruptured on Bowen Road. The other risk, when we step back a little bit, we only had one supply main feeding into town, and that was underneath the Parkway and underneath Buttertubs Marsh. So that posed a risk. And then thirdly was the hospital. I don't believe this community can afford the hospital to be out of water, and we're out there on a Friday night literally trying to shut down and isolate that water main break. 3 of our reservoirs were already drained, and then the hospital calls us, said they are out of water. So if you look at the hierarchy of risk, do we need to be there? And we looked at the condition of the pipe that was pulled out, knowing that it was inevitable that there was going to be future breaks, and the fact that we can't impact the community, we can't impact the hospital again. So as a result of building the Midtown Water Supply Project, we've gained that resiliency and that redundancy, and it's actually allowed us to defer some of the major north end growth-dependent water supply improvement projects for over 10 to 15 years out of the capital plan. Those projects are currently in the 5-year capital plan, but now reviewing it and knowing what we know by modeling the Midtown water supply improvements, we can actually defer those projects in lieu for some other higher priority risk projects, which is we've identified a bottleneck south of town, and we need to address that. So what we're proposing, you'll see it in the 5-year cap plan, is that we address that potential bottleneck that we have in there and upgrade it. Now we do still have some that remaining concrete pipe that you've heard in the news, not only Bowen, but Calgary and other municipalities such as Montreal. It's a very catastrophic pipe. When it does rupture, it can cause significant damage. We have a line that goes up College Avenue towards 5th Street, along Dogwood Road, and then along Nanaimo Lakes Road. What we've done operationally to reduce that risk and look at that, the hierarchy of developing that, other than just monitoring it, choose to monitor it or replace it. In the interim, what we've done is actually gone into each little valve and isolated. So rather than when it breaks, is to actually, the valves have been throttled. So if it does break, or pardon me, when it breaks, it will be a flow equivalent of a fire hydrant being open instead of taking down, because it's next to obviously the Nanaimo Parkway, and the Colliery Dams would be one where the downstream impacts would be. So we're happy to report that we completed that in February. So now that main is actually throttled in lieu, and so when we do the capital projects, which will take 5 years to actually get it fully replaced, pardon me. Now, in doing that, we've looked at that south end improvements, and there's a number of improvements we can do with the supply main. Obviously, supply mains are meant to be going from point A to point B, very much like a freeway where you have overpasses. What we have right now is a supply main coming into town with the bottleneck. It actually has several connections off of it. So with each and every connection, that imposes other risks. So we'll replace that line all the way up to College Drive, and in doing so, there will be a distribution main running parallel with it that will support new developments like the Taste Dufton property on the newly acquired SFN lands, and it will reduce all those, it will remove all those other what we call pressure reducing valve stations along Dogwood. So you'll have a distribution main that connects into College Park Reservoir all the way down to Western Acres. And so it's a properly gridded network, and it, again, creates some redundancy within the distribution network, and it also improves the water supply. What we're looking at right now is kind of, we're trying to stretch it out and stay within our 5-year currently projected capital. We've isolated the concrete lines, and the next 2 years it'll be time to look at detailed design and tendering, and then we'll phase it out for the next 4 years that we'll do those supply and distribution improvements. Other things that we're looking at is the South Fork Dam. This is our only water intake for the community. It's a concrete arch dam that was built in 1931. It's fully in compression. In order to comply with dam safety regulations, what we need to do is meet the Canadian Dam Safety Association standards, which is a 1 in 5,000 event, so that's like a seismic event. If we're to retain that dam for the next 100 years, there's like a 2% probability of this event happening. Again, do we want to take that risk, or do we want to be compliant with the current regulations? So we've done those seismic analysis, and everything right now is looking favorable. But what happens when the seismic event is everything's in compression. The water behind the dam actually helps keep it retained in the abutment walls, but it will move forward and put some parts of it in tension, which require further analysis. So we're going to be looking into that over the next 5 to 10 years of actually what that additional seismic analysis is and what we need to do to bring it fully compliant up to current events. Other things that keep me up at night, there's 3 holes that are depicted on the very bottom of the dam. Once a year we drain the dam and we look at it and we inspect it. Those holes have always been in there. There's 3 24-inch holes. They were put there, they called them culverts. They were part of the construction, so as you built the dam in lifts, they let the water flow underneath those culverts. When they were finished the dam, they actually plugged them from the inlet side. And they were plugged with yellow cedar, I believe, and there was a detail of it, but we see no evidence of what's plugging it now, nor can we get at it from the upstream end of it. So every year when we drain the dam, we notably see more and more flow. If just one of those culverts, 24-inch culverts, was to breach and fully flow, the reservoir, our water intake, would be drained within 2.5 days. And I quite honestly don't know how we could stop it. So we're going to be looking at going downstream, plugging those holes structurally in the next 3 or 4 years, and those will be in the proposed capital plan as well. And the other thing that keeps me up at night is our oldest water supply main is underneath our dam. So this was built with the 1931 dam. It's a steel water main. It's always been active. As far as we know, it's never been drained. There's never been a condition assessment on that pipe. So it's another thing that we have in the capital plan to either build a secondary intake and remove that pipe, or rehabilitate or mitigate that measure. Looking at our full 20-year plan and our whole risk registry, we're full. We have some major projects, but most importantly, I think it's very valuable to actually ensure that we have that plan in place. All those projects are prioritized accordingly, so they're just in time for either A, development to happen, or B, just before their full lifespan is expected, before we get any breaks or major catastrophic failures, I'd hate to say it. But also put a price tag to it so our finance department can look at it, and in conjunction with development cost charges and borrowing, and just looking at our reserves so that we have that full palette of projects other municipalities, they've known about projects such as this. And I think it's fair to say maybe they didn't get fully galvanized in the 5-year capital plan and adopted so they can actually get on with those capital improvements. So we've been very fortunate, and the council endorsed the Midtown project, and it's now paying off that we're seeing. And it's very timely this time of year. When we're looking at water flows from the dam, it's not just only for public consumption and fire protection, it's also for the environment. So half of the flow is impounded in our Jump Creek Reservoir down to South Fork Reservoir, or for environmental, so they call it EFN, environmental flow needs. And it's about a 50-50 split. So it's a real balancing act when we're coming into this time of year. We want to make sure that our reservoirs are full. You hear a lot in the news about snowpack. Our watershed is rainfall dependent. So snowpack for us is just a bonus. If we have a very good snowpack year, we'll get a little bit more in June. But for the most part, we are banking on receiving a lot of that precipitation in the wintertime, refilling the reservoirs. And then, like I said, it's a balancing act that we ensure that we provide both environmental flow needs and also community water needs. And with that, we have rule curves for whether we need to be on watering restrictions, because we're very fortunate to have decades of data where the reservoirs are, and weather stations and precipitation amounts, etc. So yeah, hopefully this year we're looking fairly good.
Questions here? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I have 3, if that's okay. Thank you very much for this. When I asked Mr. Sims for this, I didn't expect to get it so fast, so that's great. Appreciate it. One thing that we hear a lot about, or we get emails, and I know you do, is that some people are concerned that there's asbestos in our pipes or something like that. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes, asbestos cement is a very commonly used pipe in the 60s and 70s for a lot of the distribution main systems. It's more hazardous to the workers actually installing it or replacing it. So when you talk about asbestos, the friable, airborne is a danger to the workers. Asbestos cement is the reason we replace it in our capital plan, because it's an undesirable material. It's not within our standards right now. It's the majority of our water main breaks that we receive is asbestos, because it's very much like the concrete pipe, or it is concrete pipe with asbestos fibers in it. And when it breaks, it breaks off in bigger, larger chunks per se. And as far as monitoring it, after every main, we've monitored it, and we haven't found any asbestos fibers in testing.
Thank you.
We test once a year.
Second question is, you talked about the south end bottleneck. When the Sandstone development comes on board, will that help with that? Like, I'm assuming we'll be getting certain dollars from Sandstone for their infrastructure?
Through the chair, it's a different part of the system. Okay. So the Sandstone goes to, I call it our south end system, and the other 2/3 comes into the city this way.
Okay, thank you. And then just my last question is, do we still have would you say we have what we would call a good water reserve, or should we be looking at improving that?
For our watersheds,
sorry, I mean dollar-wise, sorry. What, the dollars? Our reserve fund for water. Not water, dollars. Maybe that goes to Miss.
Well, yeah.
I'm looking for, do we have a lot of dollars in our water reserve fund, so that when we have, like when we had the catastrophe there on Bowen Road, we had dollars put aside so that we could help with that, so that we're not totally relying on all of a sudden hitting hard taxation versus we're, gathering money, gathering interest.
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, we have money in reserves, but it has been drawn down because of projects like such a big scale as this one, as the water supply. So there is reserves, but
minimal. So it's something maybe the next council can look at to increase, as we don't want to end up like Calgary where it's costing billions of dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, if I may, to Mr. Squire. Thank you, sir, for the work you do, and all of our staff involved with water supply. I hope our residents are aware of how fortunate we are to have such a good water system in this city. My question maybe relates to what Councillor Armstrong was just referring to as far as reserves. And I note in your report the seismic study for South Fork. But I also recall 10 or 12 years ago, there was a long-term plan to possibly have to raise the level of South Fork Dam. And if that was the case, of course, we would need to be putting money aside for that major project. I'm hearing you say that despite our bigger population, we're not using more water. So is it correct that that proposal is basically off the table for the foreseeable future?
Yes, through the chair, that is correct. We've managed to defer that project, but that project is still a development cost charge project that we have in the 20 plus years result. So eventually, yes, we will have to, depending on what population, how it grows, but right now it's not projected that we need to build that major infrastructure, which is increasing the volume of Jump Creek Dam. That's what you're referring to.
Thank you. I'm always impressed with our long-term planning, but for the foreseeable future, we're okay with what we've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Squire. I always find the discussion about water and pipes isn't all that interesting until you think of what happened to us in 2020, right? 2020, and then what we saw in Calgary, and it was a lightning bolt of you've got to take care of your system. But I'm just wondering, when you think of that South Fork Dam with that pipe that was built in the 30s, so we're coming on 100 years, should we be applying for grants now, or are there grants available for these major projects? Because when you're looking at, 47 million, 35 million, 70 million, 50 million, should we be applying for grants today for those big projects like that?
Yeah, through the chair, that's exactly, and that's what I was trying to stress with having the 20-year plan where we have all those projects identified, we have the cost, we have the full scope of what's required, so they are grant ready. We did apply for a grant 2 years ago for the seismic upgrade and the new intake for that, but unfortunately we weren't successful. So eyes are always out there on grants, and certainly, as we mentioned, with reserve funds, and that's another source of funding that we can certainly tap into.
Okay. Should we be discussing this with the province, with our MLAs in September when we go to the UBCM? Is this something that we should bring up?
Through the chair, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, item 2, frontage works and services. Ms. Negrin, manager of subdivision.
Hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Claire Negrin. I'm the manager of subdivision, and I'm also the deputy approving officer here at the city. I'm here to talk to you about frontage works and services. All right, so today I'm going to give you a very, very high-level, broad overview of frontage works and services. What are they? Where does the authority come from? How do we set the standard? It's a very, very complicated, it's a large topic. I'll try my best. I'm going to go through the information relatively quickly. If you have questions at the end, if I haven't covered a topic, please, by all means. And I'm also going to just discuss a few upcoming and future initiatives related to this topic that you may see in the near future. All right, what are frontage works and services? So when we say this, what we mean is infrastructure constructed within a public roadway or a lane or a trailway adjacent to a property that's being developed. Works often refers to the surface elements, and services often refers to the subsurface elements. I'll get into a little bit more detail about all of the things that are encompassed within those words. And where do we get the authority to require them? It's through the Local Government Act that provides local governments with the authority to set standards by bylaw for the works and services. And the Local Government Act also allows local governments to require those works and services in relation to the development of land. The Local Government Act allows us to vary those works and services based on land use, zone, area of town, or by road classification. And what city bylaws apply? There are two main bylaws that require works and services. The Subdivision Control Bylaw, 1989, 3260, is the bylaw that requires works and services at the time of subdivision. And the Building Bylaw 2016, number 7224, is the bylaw that requires works and services at the time of building permit. The standards themselves are found within the Subdivision Control Bylaw. It's called the Manual of Engineering Standards and Specifications. Maybe you've heard of it. MOESS is what we refer to it as. So it lives within the Subdivision Bylaw, but the standards themselves also apply at building permit stage. And there's a lot of words on this slide. This is straight from the legislation, all of the things that we refer to that are works and services. So you see works, highways, sidewalks, boulevards, wiring, benches, all sorts of street furniture, alternative forms of transportation infrastructure, so anything that supports bicycling, transit, and as well as sustainable design features such as water conservation. And then services, water distribution, fire hydrants, sanitary sewer collection and disposal, drainage and stormwater collection and disposal. So it's a whole myriad of things. And then sometimes there's other things that we refer to and require through development, what I call survey and legal infrastructure. The city of Nanaimo has integrated survey monuments throughout town, so we require those to be installed through development. We also require legal infrastructure, is what I refer to it as, rights of way, covenants, easements, and those sorts of things. And through development, we can also sometimes require off-site works. So not necessarily right in front of the development. And that sometimes depends on the scale of the development, if there's going to be off-site impacts to our road system, if we need sidewalk connections, or sanitary or water storm upgrades. The pipes aren't big enough to support what is being proposed. So that can happen off-site, but it's still a requirement that we can ask for. So when do we require them? Again, there's really just the two stages of development that trigger the requirement for frontage works and services, subdivision and building permit. Through subdivision, works and services are required to be installed prior to registration of the subdivision. However, there is some policy, there's actually two duplicate policies, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, that state if a subdivision is under construction and there's a need to register it early, we can do so with a construction agreement and bonding for those works. And we do see that every once in a while. I wanted to give you a sense of the types of works and services that can be required through subdivision. What you'll see here is a 2021 versus a 2025 aerial of a subdivision, 23 lots, and a brand new road that was created called Avani Way. So this is an example of full works through a subdivision, a new road, as well as frontage works. You'll see Park Avenue, which was already dedicated, had new sidewalks and bike lanes and intersections installed as part of the subdivision. What I thought was really interesting about this photo particularly is you'll see Cordon Street has a couple of different standards. I've shown a section of circa 2011 standard where you have a sidewalk right adjacent to a road. And then in 2016, you can see how our standard changed, and now there's a boulevard between the road and the sidewalk. And then if you go up to Avani Way, that's our most recent standard, and what you can see is, maybe it's a pretty small photo, but the driveways are extended even further. So there's not parking all the way along Cordon Street, or the way that it is on Cordon Street, but there's areas designated for parking along Avani Way. So I thought that was interesting to see the progression of our standards through time. And then there's other subdivision examples. You all may be aware of this example. And what I've provided here is 4 different snapshots over time. 2008, before any 3 of these properties developed, and then, as you can see, 2016, 2022, 2025, subsequent subdivisions occurring all in the same area. You can also see the progression of our standards through this, but what I wanted to highlight here is how sometimes one development goes in, and then you'll find more and more development of adjacent properties starting to happen as you can see the potential in the area. So this is a really great example. One subdivision in 2016, and now there's been 2 more in the last 10 years just nearby. All right, and now works and services through building permit are required prior to issuance of a building permit or occupancy. The building bylaw requires that a building permit itself cannot be issued unless the works and services are either installed or secured. And typically through building permit, they are secured through construction agreement and bonding, and that's our standard process. So a couple of examples. This is next to City Hall. The building, Cardero building at Franklin and Wallace. So even a brand new replacement of a building could trigger works and services. So you can see the improvements that happened on Wallace and Franklin, as well as I believe it's, what's that street behind? Robson, thank you. Behind, which you can't see in the photo, but all 3 frontages were improved with this building. Another example is actually 3 separate properties all had building permits. And this is the corner of Halliburton and Milton. And what I wanted to highlight here is the photo in 2025, you can see 3 brand new buildings, but what you can also see is a gap between them with a small single-family dwelling, but you can see that the frontage works have been installed there. And so often when there's projects like this, the city will come in and cost share if there's opportunity to have continuous works and services. We try sometimes as we can to cost share where there's raised intersections perhaps that are needed or crossings that may be desired in certain areas. All right, so how do we determine the extent of work required through development? And there's really 3 places that we look. The first is through the bylaws that I had identified, and there are bylaw exemptions that exist in both subdivision and building bylaw that I'll talk about. We look to policy direction. I'll talk about the policies that apply, and there's also safety and best practices considerations. So through bylaw, so as a starting point, 100% full frontage works and services is the baseline required for everything, subdivisions and building permits. Through subdivision, there is full exemption for frontage works for any parcels zoned I3 or I4, that's general or heavy industrial in the bylaw. In the building bylaw, there are additional exemptions. So you'll see highway industrial where the value does not exceed $150,000 for the permit. I2 light industrial where the value does not exceed $250,000. And then again, full frontage works exemptions for the I3 and I4 zones. There's additional exemptions in the building bylaw where additional floor area is added to a building that doesn't exceed 25% of existing, or 600 square meters, whichever is less, where there's 4 or fewer residential dwelling units, or where there's no increase in floor area whatsoever. So those are all exemptions that are built into the bylaw. And then we look to policy. So there's a couple of places where we look. One is this council policy, guidelines for the application of frontage works and services requirements. And this is intended to guide staff in circumstances where we may reduce or modify the amount of works and services required. So where a development does not get us to the ultimate road standard, we don't know what the ultimate alignment of the road may be. So we don't want to install works unnecessarily if where the road is, the grade of the road is not what it ultimately will be, were more development or a bigger project to come through. Where the works aren't practical unless they were to be part of a larger capital project, or where the construction and installation of those works may cause a safety or operational issue. The policy also provides opportunity for cost share, so this is the policy that we use to guide us to consider whether or not to cost share. And then there's also exemptions for things like if it's a really small amount of frontage, like 30 meters or less is what's in the policy. If we don't expect future development to occur within that area. So as I showed you the 3 that were kind of consecutive, yes, we foresee there being additional works development potential. But if there's no development potential, we could reduce the frontage works. So that's one main policy that we look to. And more recently, we have city plan policy. City plan policy really highlights the desire to get works and services through development. Our complete street section is where you'll find kind of the bulk of these policies. So incorporating complete streets principles into construction and retrofits, and requiring future development to implement street-oriented design approaches and those sorts of things. So these policies also guide us in considering how much and when and where to require works and services. And then there's also safety and best practices for works and services. So what is the reality and the circumstances of the area, of the land? What are the safety implications and engineering best practices? So when a development comes in, the required works and services are reviewed by our development engineering department, and it's between the applicant's professional engineer and our staff. The works are designed and certified by the applicant's professional engineer, and then we do require them to meet the MOESS standard. Any deviation from that standard has to be approved by our city engineer, who is Mr. Paul Rosen. I also wanted to flag that despite all of this, an applicant could apply for a development variance permit to vary the requirements of the bylaw. Some of you may remember we had an application for 505 8th Street. It was a subdivision, and the applicant applied to vary the works and services. So that is a mechanism that's available to applicants as well. So this is just a highlight of our development tools and timelines. So when you think about works and services, sometimes off-site works can be secured through rezoning. So I've highlighted that here, and flagged through rezoning. We can get things like road dedication and covenants SRWs as necessary. Through the development permit process, we can't require works and services or road dedication, but staff will review requirements to let applicants know what they may expect in the future. It's good information for developers to know what they may get into through building permit. Through subdivision, we can require all of these tools: works and services, road dedication, the acronyms there, development cost charges, amenity cost charges, and the third one there is school site amenity charges that we collect on behalf of the school district. And then lastly, covenants, SRWs, and easements. And then through building permit, we can require all of these things through building permit. In order to take road dedication, we need a servicing officer, and that bylaw to designate a servicing officer is impending. So just to summarize, frontage works and services are legislative authority that we implement by bylaw and determine through a policy review. And the timing is typically before an application is approved or secured through bonding. All right, so just to touch on really quickly some upcoming initiatives. As you may have noted, in which I tried to emphasize, our subdivision control bylaw was adopted in 1989. It is old, it is in need of an update, and so we will be bringing forward an updated or brand new bylaw, I should say, is a subdivision and development servicing bylaw that's intended to come forward in June. Along with it is the next update to the Manual of Engineering Standards and Specifications. Edition 15 is coming forward. Like I say, that is part of the subdivision bylaw, so they'll come together as one. And then at the same time, we'll bring forward the bylaw for the servicing officer designation, which is an amendment to our officer designation and delegation of authority bylaw. I also wanted to highlight that city plan update is coming forward. It's intended to go to public hearing in May, I believe next week. And through that bylaw update is an amendment to Schedule 4, which is the road classification plan. When city plan was first adopted in 2022, new road classifications were applied, and since then what we've seen is maybe some of the classifications weren't quite correct. So there will be some of those that are going to be reclassified to better align with the land use designations. And then following these things, what we hope to be able to do is review and potentially update the building bylaw. So those exemptions with the new subdivision and development servicing bylaw, we'll want to review those and make sure that what the exemptions are in the building bylaw align with the new subdivision bylaw and MOESS. And I'd also like to review the applicable policies. As I say, there's a couple of redundant policies that could be combined, and the guidelines for the application of frontage works and services still speaks to low density residential development as one of the exemptions, which doesn't really apply anymore. So we'd like to review that to get it more in line with current zoning. And then what we're also working on is a new latecomer policy and bylaw. Latecomer policy applies, a developer can enter into a latecomers agreement if the city requires works and services in excess of a development. They enter into a latecomers agreement, and then as future development connects to whatever it is that they installed, that future developer would then pay the original installer of those works for those services that they installed. So that's all the information I wanted to present. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, lovely, thank you so much. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is on upcoming initiatives. You said there's a city plan amendment. Are you talking OCP or city plan? Because I get so much concern from citizens, they don't know what you're referring to, because the only thing they're aware of is OCP. My understanding is city plan involves everything, so does that mean there's an amendment for all city plans, or are you talking OCP?
It is OCP, yes.
Thank you. Just for further, I really wish you guys would use OCP, because I'm not the only one that gets questioned on that all the time, because people don't know what a city plan is. They've heard reimagine, they've heard this, and the only thing recognized in legislation is OCP. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. First, an observation. We often hear from housing providers that the policy around works and services is problematic because it increases the price of housing and what they can sell. However, your transitional slides showing what those engineering standards look like in neighborhoods was actually really validating, because it's the city that people want to live in. It's the boulevards, it's the trees, it's all those pieces. So it's nice to have that kind of balanced understanding of what it means when we ask for works and services. It's good for the entire community, and it does cost developers and housing providers more, but it benefits everyone. And there are things like trees and boulevards that we all recognize as valuable. So that's just an observation. The question I have, and you might have just answered it in your closing comment, we've seen along Metro Drive, investment has really kind of focused on that area, because there have been some really amazing improvements along that corridor. So what happens when we have someone come in and build a big apartment building and works and services are already in? Do they contribute to a fund? Do we ask them for later works and services? Are they given a pass?
Well, I mean, in the case of Metro Drive was a capital project. It wasn't like a DCC project that we, the city, front-ended, and there's a latecomers agreement available, right? So in that case, development there benefits from not having to install those works and services. And no, we wouldn't require them to pay what they otherwise would have if they hadn't already been installed.
So that in and of itself is a really good, I think, argument for investment, because it drives further investment and it drives housing investment. So thank you. One final, you did note that cost sharing, we can collect frontage of improvements at a later date. Can you just explain that a bit?
So an example I can provide is if there's an existing city project, recently there was a subdivision of Nanaimo North Town Center, and Rutherford Road needs a bike lane. And there is a larger project already designated there. So rather than have that developer build just a piece of it, they contributed funds instead to that larger project.
Okay, thank you for that specification. That's to the larger project. Our advocacy to UBCM is to allow us to pool funds for other projects. Okay,
Yes.
thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Negrin. This is great. I was the one who asked that this be brought forward, and when I realized that it was going to be a huge topic, you carried it off beautifully, so I really appreciate that. So just a couple of questions. The reason why I brought it up initially was there's a particular road where a new dental office was put in. It's in a bit of an odd area for that type of office, and there's now a sidewalk and a boulevard and a bike lane and nothing else further down, and there won't be for likely decades, simply because it's quite a heavy industrial area. That surprised me that we would require that for just that area of land, and I did talk to Mr. Holm about this, so I'm just wondering, why would that have happened, and how should it have happened, and what could we have done differently, or should we have done something differently?
I believe that was a building permit requirement. I mean, I can't speak to the project specifically. I don't know if Mr. Holm would like to.
Yes, you know which one I'm talking about, yes.
Sure, I can probably, through the chair, add a couple of comments on that one.
Sure.
I won't have all the details at hand, but that was a property that was actually, or a number of properties now, but it was rezoned originally.
Yes.
And then frontage works and services were secured through
Right.
rezoning. And you'll see there's actually a piece that's been dedicated as park, and the frontage works are in front of the park as well. And then there's a gap where frontage works will go in through future building permit. Because of the grade change on Shenton Road, it didn't make sense to install the full frontage works. It's actually there's a park and then two separate properties. So unfortunately, we end up with a gap in the interim until building development goes in. They'll likely have underground parking, they'll have retaining, and they'll introduce the frontage works in the gap later. But given so through the rezoning and given the full review of the property, I believe it also went through subdivision, subsequently a boundary adjustment too. But we're looking at the extent of the road along there, and there were no pedestrian facilities or cycling infrastructure on that side of the road to start with. And through the rezoning, it was identified, and then subsequent building permitting, the details of the engineering works that were required were identified through the building permit process, but the original requirement was through rezoning.
I appreciate that. I respectfully, I don't 100% agree. However, I understand what you're saying. It's simply because it stops, and I wouldn't want pedestrians walking in that area given the industrial businesses that are further down. But it's not to take away the funds from the frontage works that are required, but to put them somewhere else where they might be better utilized. And I just wonder, do we do that? Do we, and that's the struggle that I'm having is, you know, we have some areas that are desperate for sidewalks, you know, bike lanes, whatever. Boulevards would be fantastic. And I'm just wondering, should we be putting it here when really it's desperately needed over there? And not, because the particular developer said to me, it's not that I don't want to pay, it's that I don't think it's needed here, but maybe over there.
And through the chair again, to Councilor Perino, so that would be in line with other requests that's been made, the advocacy to UBCM, through UBCM to the province. So right now, currently, and it's something actually that we're looking at introducing through the update to the subdivision control bylaw. This, we're calling it now the
Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw.
So we're looking at improving flexibility in that regard. We could also potentially through variance,
Yes.
through varying frontage
Yes.
works, we can.
True.
There's limited flexibility, but we can look at that. If there had been a capital project like Ms. Negrin explained on Rutherford Road,
Right.
we can, if we've got a defined capital project and the city's coming through with a major project within the capital planning period,
Okay.
and we're committed to that, then we can enter into a cost share agreement and then put the funds towards that. So we do use those tools, but we have limited flexibility.
So, yeah, just final comments, Chair, it's nice to see that you're going to be looking at some changes, some flexibility, because I do think there are things that we could be doing better, but I really appreciated this. It was really helpful to have it, so thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Councillor Thorpe, or no, Councillor Manley and then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My understanding about the Shenton Road is it's connected to, isn't it connected to something going around Darvage Lake as well? So there's a walkway going in?
Through the chair, yeah, eventually there will be, there's intended to be a walkway circling the lake, and this would be part of that on road fronting. There, eventually we'd see a walkway, hopefully, fronting along closer to the lake within the properties. There's been some rights of way secured. It's kind of a long-term project, but it's within the, I think it's identified in city plan as an initiative as well, but it was previously in the Parks Trail master plan.
Okay.
Yes.
That wasn't originally my question, but I just think like we do see these chunks happening around town. Hammond Bay is another example, and people are curious about it, but this is how we're getting, our ability to be able to pay for some of this infrastructure. My question is just about the payment in lieu of work, so the resolution that was brought to UBCM, so we're not able to take that payment in lieu of works until the government actually changes the legislation, is that correct?
Through the chair, cautiously, potentially, but it would have to be in limited circumstances, and the guidance received so far and what we will be introducing into the new subdivision and development servicing bylaw is cash in lieu, but that cash has to be put towards those works within that area.
Okay.
Right? So you can't collect in Hammond Bay and apply downtown, right?
Yeah, it has to be in close proximity.
Correct.
Okay. And, yeah, I guess we could wait for the provincial government for a while to actually change the legislation, but hopefully that happens soon, because I think it makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe.
If I may, a couple of questions. Thank you, Ms. Negrin. Very interesting report. Appreciate it. First of all, Councillor Manley's question triggered something in my mind, and that is when we do accept payment in lieu, surely we've had cases where that has been directed towards our housing fund, which is a general fund. Am I mistaken?
Not that I'm
Because I understand the intent is that it would be applied to the area of the development, which I think is appropriate. So maybe I'm wrong there, but
I wonder, and it looks like Mr. Holm might have an answer, if that might be amenity contributions as opposed to works.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Thorpe's question. So yeah, the works and services funds we couldn't apply to like the Housing Legacy Reserve. Is that what you're thinking? We've actually used the Housing Legacy Reserve, and maybe this is what you're thinking about too. Is we've used the Housing Legacy Reserve in cases, say for instance, where we're working with BC Housing. To actually fund some of the works and services, to cost share in the works and services, but we can't take the cost share for works and services from a private developer and funnel it towards Housing Legacy Reserve. We'd be limited to using it with amendments to the subdivision bylaws, Ms. Negrin's referenced, we may be able to use works and services cash contribution in lieu of for localized improvements, but that again would be to the works and services, not to housing in and of its own.
Okay, thanks very much. That clarifies that for me. If I may, Chair, the question I wanted to ask, I think maybe goes partly to Councillor Perino's comments, and it relates to the slide, and you don't have to go back to it, but how is the extent of the work determined? And there's a large variety of possible projects or small projects which could be involved in frontage or works. And the term flexibility, I think, was mentioned. And if not, I'll mention it. Is there any flexibility? Can a developer basically challenge what they're being asked to provide by suggesting that this might not be appropriate in this particular location, or something else might be more appropriate in another location? Is there flexibility? Is there negotiation involved?
Through the chair, I mean, it really comes down to the discretion of the city engineer, what flexibility we have. We do use policy to guide those decisions, but ultimately, if a developer, without coming to council for variance, is asking for flexibility, it is the city engineer who has the authority to make those decisions. Alternative solutions are something that is provided for in the MOESS. So if a developer's engineer had something else in mind that might achieve what the bylaw hopes to happen, an engineer could provide an alternative solution, but that solution again would have to be approved by the city engineer.
Okay, and I don't want to be too specific here, and maybe I'm way off base, but I'm thinking of projects and frontage works where, and I'll be quite blunt, we have very nice boulevards put in. Who determines if a boulevard is appropriate in that location, or how wide it needs to be, or if a bike path is really necessary in that location, or should we have a transit bay? Those types of decisions, because quite frankly, sometimes I look around and think, why did we do that here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through the chair, it's the bylaw. It's the bylaw that decides the width of the boulevard and whether a bike lane and a sidewalk is required as part of the road standard. So first, city plan, the official community plan designates whether it's a mobility arterial or an urban collector, and then the MOESS has that standard that dictates what, it's a 2-meter sidewalk or it's a 2.5-meter sidewalk. So it's the bylaws themselves, and then the reduction to those or modification to those is where we look to the policy to see whether it's appropriate based on the circumstances to reduce or modify those works. And again, the discretion, that's significant staff review is, right, as an example, through subdivision, we refer to our transportation department and our public works department, our development engineering department, who all review, based on their expertise, whether full frontage works are required or whether something modified standard may be appropriate.
All right, that's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Great. Just some comments on that. I think, appreciate the overview of works and services, and I think, a couple of the examples brought up of just sort of, the bike lanes to nowhere. And, I'm definitely somebody that really wants to see the pedestrian and cycling infrastructure built out, especially a minimum grid. And I think sometimes where there's been a determination for need of works and services, where there's nothing else around, and the likelihood it does undermine sort of the credibility of that bike lane, and it is wonderful political fodder. And I think that I'm pleased to hear that there is some look at amending the bylaw to allow greater flexibility, and I think that on some of those cases that we do know that have received a lot of attention for, looking at, learning from those and the nuance of how we're applying it, and if greater flexibility in the bylaw or the policy is needed to provide the attention, the nuanced attention that it does require in those. I think that's something that's worthwhile for us to explore further, and I think all of us can look further into it and look at what potential changes in policy, or when the bylaw comes, to be paying attention to what flexibility is put in there to make sure that we can help everybody out and get it right. So just a comment. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Our next item, and people have been patiently waiting, so thank you. So Health and Housing Action Plan, Progress Update and Funding Options, that will be presented first with staff, and then we have some delegations. So Ms. Bhopal Singh, are you leading us off?
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to give a brief introduction. I'd like to emphasize, as Councillor Hemmons just mentioned, the presentations you've just heard from Mr. Squire and Ms. Negrin demonstrate the complexity of the infrastructure and servicing processes required to deliver new housing while ensuring existing housing maintains sustainable for our residents. And so building on this, the Health and Housing Action Plan that Council adopted in 2021. Today, staff are going to give you an update on our progress towards various actions and some next steps for you to consider. So the report you have before you gives several options for you to consider directing staff to come back with more details. And you may choose any of those, none of those, or a combination thereof. And one thing I'll mention as well is Nanaimo's seen very solid growth in the actual delivery of housing units, as you know from prior presentations. Where we struggle, like our counterparts across the country and in BC, is in the suitability and affordability of those units. And so today you'll hear from Ms. Sprinkman, who is our Manager of Community Planning, and Ms. Wood, our Manager of Social Development, who represent and actually stand behind, in front of and behind 40 other staff who are all involved in delivering housing for the city. You'll also hear from a delegation, a collaboration of community partners who are sitting behind me, who represent Professor Dave Whitty that you know, Bob Moss, our Prosperity Corporation, and then a consulting company known as the Anchor Group. And so after that, you'll have a chance to discuss with staff, and we'll do our best to answer questions on what is proving to be one of the most wicked problems across Canada. So without further ado, if I could turn over to Ms. Brinkman and Ms. Wood to lead us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bhopal Singh. Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate being here today. I'm just going to flip to the other side because Ms. Bhopal Singh did a great introduction of the report today. So the Health and Housing Action Plan was adopted by the city in February 2021 as the city's framework for addressing homelessness, housing, health, safety, and poverty reduction. And at that time, Nanaimo lacked a formal integrated system government structure, which led to the creation of the Nanaimo Systems Planning Organization. The SPO, also known as the SPO, was to support and stewardship the Health and Housing Action Plan. And since then, the broader context has changed, particularly through the alignment project, through the alignment of the federal Reaching Home strategy and the provincial Belonging in BC strategy, which resulted in the alignment project, which is now the required governance framework for communities that are receiving designated funding from the federal government and funding from BC Housing. During this same period, community needs also continued to evolve and system structures shifted, prompting council to discontinue funding for the SPO. Following that decision, staff committed to returning to council with a status update on the plan and direction on how remaining funds should be spent. The city to date
has not received substantive work products or operational files from the SPO. So as a result, staff are unable to fully assess the scope of the activities of the SPO outside of the quarterly updates that council has been receiving. Efforts are ongoing right now to do final assessments, including the final financial status of the SPO, which you'll hear a little bit later about as well. So the update before the committee reflects staff's best knowledge, informed by our day-to-day work out in the city, participation in the alignment project, and input from community partners. It focuses on the work period from 2021 to 2025, but we will touch upon in some of the other contexts like the 2019 MOU that helps set the stage for that as well. There's a lot of information. So attachment B really provides a priority by priority identified in the Health and Housing Action Plan and the current status and the community work that's happening through there. So I won't touch upon all of those things, but if there's any questions about that, please let me know. So the first pillar I'm going to focus on is the systems coordination. As we all know, we sit around this table, and the work that we do in community, homelessness and housing and health are very complex and not the responsibility of a single government or organization. So that effective response requires coordinated leadership, very clear roles, shared accountability, and better alignment of data and funding. The Alignment Project, which I've mentioned and Council has received a presentation for in March, was created through provincial and federal policy and funding changes. And while the Alignment Project is currently focused on people with the highest and most urgent needs, over time, the intent is to strengthen the full housing network, including non-market, supportive, transitional, and social housing. Many system planning functions previously associated with the SPO have been formally adopted within this Alignment Project framework, marking a shift from what we had hoped for a local created model to a standard senior government standardized model. The Homelessness Response Leadership Table, part of the Alignment Project, provides that overall leadership and direction to the Alignment Project, bringing senior partners in the city, so all levels of government, as well as community partners and funders, together to align those priorities, leverage funding, and address system-level barriers. And there are supporting tables that you probably remembered that giant graphic of all the different working tables and stuff are focusing on the implementation and day-to-day coordination of that. So to support all of that kind of collective impact approach, there's been a backbone team that's been created, and so that includes BC Housing staff, staff from United Way, who are the designated entity to deliver that Reaching Home funding, staff from Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada, Sinemook First Nation, city staff, Mid-Island Métis, and Tilikum Lalem are supporting that coordination, information sharing, and alignment. Council approves temporary social development staffing allowed the city to participate meaningfully. We represent the local government interests within that project and contribute local housing and land use knowledge, the community safety context, and the cross-department coordination. I should note that during the SPO dissolution, there was discussion about a proposed project that the SPO had with Colliers to develop a non-market housing strategy and action plan with the goal of facilitating a minimum of 100 non-market units annually, in addition, so that'd be on top of the BC Housing and federal projects. And the concept of a non-market housing strategy proposed through this Colliers project was focused on navigating development challenges, coordinating resources, and aligning with funding priorities. The idea was that this strategy could have supported one-off projects for housing or a potential housing corporation model. So following that meeting, staff met with Colliers after the SPO dissolution and confirmed that no substantive work had commenced at that time beyond the initial kickoff meetings. No follow-up materials or deliverables were produced prior to the SPO winding down, and the contract was ended with Colliers by the SPO with no further financial commitments. So that's the information we've received. With the Alignment Project and the HRLT established, the roles and accountabilities are being finalized through a terms of reference. The Health and Housing Action Plan priorities are embedded as shared outcomes, and the focus is now shifting from the governance setup, so that setup's been done, to implementation, and that's looking at service access, shared data through coordinated access, coordinated responses through housing, health, outreach, and prevention.
Thank you. So the next pillar I'm going to talk about is diverse housing options. So there's 8 slides. So in the Health and Housing Action Plan, the target for permanent supportive housing was 90 units by 2025. And so in Nanaimo, we currently have approximately 400 permanent supportive housing units on 12 sites throughout the city. This number includes the recent 110 units at 702 Nickel and 285 Prideaux. Also, we have 3 new BC Housing permanent supportive housing developments coming soon with a total of 117 units. So that's at 355 Nickel, a building permit is in process for 35 units. 1850 Boxwood, a building permit is in process for 22 complex care units. At the corner of Mackenzie and Old Victoria Road, we have a development permit in process for 60 units. The Health and Housing Action Plan target for temporary supportive housing was 70 units by 2025. And so we've met that in a few ways. So in 2022, 18 temporary housing units were provided for Nanaimo First Nation, which the city supported using provincial strengthening community funds. And the recent BC Housing Hearth program has introduced 109 temporary units at Old Victoria Road and 1300 Island Highway. And then the 2 other temporary housing sites that were in operation before the Health and Housing Action Plan are still in operation at Labio Road and Terminal Avenue. The Health and Housing Action Plan target for affordable housing was 20 units. So affordable housing was meant as, we also call it social housing, so these are regular rental units that are subsidized to make them affordable for low-income households. And 20 was a low target at that time. The provincial housing target recently given to the city for this category was 386 affordable housing units annually that are needed. But in the past few years, we have seen progress here. 60 units for seniors was completed at Seafield Crescent, and kudos to a local nonprofit in BC Housing for partnering and providing that. And phase 2 is near completion, hopefully this summer. Also, BC Housing funded 93 affordable housing units on 2 other sites in the city at Kenworth and Hammond Bay Road, so those are completed. And soon we will see new affordable units being constructed at Cranberry Avenue and on 5th Street, formerly known as Tutuxton. So while BC Housing has funded a great deal of the projects mentioned on the last 3 slides, city staff from several departments work hard to make that happen. Finance staff are essential for helping with funding applications and funding reporting. Planning, building, you saw subdivision staff today, our water department, real estate, to get very involved in all of the stages. Social development staff and safety staff also get involved, particularly once the housing is constructed, to support coordination, programming, and safety matters. So the next 3 slides are about other projects the city has completed in recent years to support a diversity of housing. So there have been amendments to the zoning bylaw, so to allow 4 housing units on over 20,000 residential properties in the city, so that's smooth, the small-scale multi-unit housing. We've amended the zoning bylaw to improve the enforcement of short-term rentals to protect the long-term housing market. We've allowed a density bonus for rental and non-market housing so that more density is allowed without a rezoning. And we've allowed secondary suites and duplexes in single-family homes. So since 2005, there's about 4,000 secondary suites that have been constructed in the city. So that means approximately 20% of our single-family homes actually have secondary suites, which is a BC average. So to support a diversity of non-market housing in recent years, many staff have been involved with supporting the 2019 Memorandum of Understanding to deliver non-market housing on 6 sites in the city. DCC reductions have been continually being offered, and there's a housing agreement with each of those that you see presented to you at council in recent years on different sites. We've updated the property tax exemption program for non-market housing, so that was a joint project with finance and community planning. The real estate team completed a land acquisition strategy, so this was to prioritize the land the city should purchase for our priorities, including non-market housing. And the Housing Legacy Reserve Fund bylaw was updated, which is a resource that council can use at any time to support housing. So more recent or current housing initiatives that are underway, is the BC Builds program, which is active, where the province and the city are working together to seek a development partner for housing at Commercial Street and Pine Street. We have the MOU with BC Housing for Heart and Hearth programming, and this has involved real estate staff and social development staff. An update to the zoning bylaw is underway, which will seek ways to remove barriers to housing. A project is also underway for pre-zoning land for non-market housing, which you had heard about, and we hope to bring that to council in July for final consideration. The Woodgrove area plan will be brought to council later this month and will provide clarity for how to create a complete community at Woodgrove. And also, when older apartment buildings are proposed to be demolished, we'll be presenting a tenant relocation policy in June to protect tenants facing displacement from those buildings. An updated parking bylaw will be brought to council later this month with many reductions for parking, which will help housing. There's been an initiative underway to streamline the building permit process, and I know you had a GPC meeting recently about that. And then new DCC reductions for non-market housing have been introduced to prepare for the new DCC program. And finally, we are doing much more tracking of housing unit data, and this was partially in response to the provincial housing target order, and it's a good exercise, and so I'll be bringing more housing data to you in July with regards to the housing target order. And so last two slides are just to summarize and say the development of housing is a complex collaboration involving banks and lenders, architects, engineers, developers, builders, building suppliers, community partners. And so the City of Nanaimo's role is really limited to land use regulation and building permit approvals, provision of services to housing such as roads, water, sewer, garbage pickup, and collecting development cost charges, issuing property tax exemptions. Also, council and staff participate in advocacy to the federal and provincial government for funding and programs and to apply for funding. And we do many types of partnerships with governments, the nation, and community organizations to support housing. So as Ms. Bhopal Singh mentioned, we do have well over 40 staff to enable the provision of housing, and council plays a role, and the staff in many departments work collaboratively and play a role. So that's all about the housing pillar.
Thank you, Ms. Brinkman. So the next slide talks about the leadership and engagement and the priorities identified under the Health and Housing Action Plan. So this is a strong area of progress under the Health and Housing Action Plan, and a lot of that work is also being conducted through the Alignment Project. As I mentioned earlier, all the priorities from the Health and Housing Action Plan are embedded in the governance terms of reference, the working group mandates and reporting processes, ensuring alignment between local action and provincial and federal programs. A big piece in the Health and Housing Action Plan was around reconciliation and Indigenous leadership. So a key objective is that at least 51% of governance members be Indigenous or from Indigenous-led organizations. So this commitment has been formally adopted within the Homelessness Response Leadership Table structure, with Snuneymuxw First Nations recognized as a leader in guiding those priorities and decision-making as well. Beyond governance, the city has worked directly with Snuneymuxw First Nations to help support some of those priorities in the Health and Housing Action Plan, and that includes what Ms. Brinkman mentioned around culturally appropriate housing and homelessness response. So in addition to the temporary and scattered site housing that we were able to fund through Strengthening Communities, an Indigenous-led outreach team was supported, and cultural safety for community safety officers were also provided as well. Leadership and engagement has also been strengthened through the formal inclusion of people with lived and living experience so that they can have direct input on priorities, system improvements, and accountability as well. The next pillar is focus on prevention. And prevention, as we know, has become an increasingly important focus in the city, as well as a big piece of the Health and Housing Action Plan. And that's really to help people remain housed and avoid homelessness before a crisis. And we recognize that early intervention is more effective and less costly to us over the long term if we can work preventatively. Under the plan, the city has supported prevention through advocacy and active participation in the Alignment Project, working on coordinated access and shared data systems. I know we've been waiting for that to come. There is a light at the end of the tunnel there. The city's role really around that has focused on supporting that local implementation and strengthening the early identification of housing risk. At the community level, the city has implemented practical prevention supports through the rent supplement program, support for the Nanaimo Region Rent Bank, and eviction prevention initiatives that Ms. Brinkman has mentioned around the rental tenant relocation. In 2025, the city funded 213 rent supplements supporting 324 individuals and families to remain housed. That's a big number. During the same period, the Nanaimo Region Rent Bank issued 96 rent bank loans, and that assisted 272 individuals and families facing short-term financial crises. Prevention has also been strengthened across cross-department coordination. So just an example of that during emergencies is the work that public safety through social development is doing with fire, with emergency management, especially around the Value Lodge relocation. So the teams work together to stabilize approximately 45 residents from falling into homelessness. Other additional city-led initiatives support longer-term stability, including the work that we do around the youth. Yes, the Building Safer Communities Fund was meant to work around preventing youth from engaging in violence and gang, but poverty is one of those big indicators of that, and we know with the most recent homeless point in time count with 54 youth being identified that this is work that we need to continue on as well. Collectively, when you look at the impact, and we're going to go a little bit over the financial slides as well, this prevention work is the highest impact and the most cost-effective investments under the plan. So we reduce those pressures on shelters and emergency services while improving outcomes for the community. The other pillar is the complex needs capability. So work is ongoing with that, and we know at this table and in the community, we have a lot of individuals that are facing overlapping challenges related to homelessness, health, mental health, and substance use and safety. And so the focus under the Health and Housing Action Plan here was to improve coordination so services can respond more quickly and effectively. So example of that is the Nanaimo Acute Response Table, which this committee has been very supportive of. It's hosted by the city until 2031, and that Nanaimo Acute Response Table brings over 25 organizations from the housing sector, health services, police, and provincial ministries. And they work to connect individuals facing serious and immediate risks to appropriate supports, typically developing a plan with partners within 24 to 48 hours with a plan to how they're going to connect and deliver services to this individual. The Health and Housing Action Plan also identified the need for a centralized navigation, which was for a short time fulfilled through the hub, and that was operating as what we would call the Health and Housing Action Plan Navigation Center. The hub provided low barrier access to housing, health, and social supports and helped 54 people with very high needs move into housing. The city also continues to support coordinated responses through participation in the BC Housing's Heart and Hearth programs, through the Encampment Response Plan that we work on with BC Housing, and interdepartmental coordination during other things like extreme weather events, including access to meals, shelters, transportation, and indoor space as well. The other thing that's important to mention is the oncoming of the Wellness and Recovery Center that's being built by Island Health right now. And it's going to be bringing addiction medicine, withdrawal management, outreach services together in one location. There will be a rapid addiction clinic as well as a wound clinic there, all providing kind of complex needs services. In parallel, the city has also strengthened responses through our Community Safety Officer program and our Community Policing program. And so that's, adding more supports for the neighborhoods, but also including through our CSOs enhanced overdose response and direct participation in coordinated housing and service tables with the CSOs attending there. So the last pillar is focused on poverty reduction. So the Health and Housing Action Plan recognizes a strong connection between homelessness and poverty. While income assistance and poverty reduction policies largely fall under senior government level, we play an important role locally just through programs and some of the partnerships that we can provide. So one example is the Leisure Economic Access Pass, or the LEAP Pass, that enables low-income households to access recreation and leisure opportunities that support physical and social and emotional well-being. Another example is the city has provided direct funding to Loaves and Fishes to operate a warehouse that strengthens food distribution for low and moderate income households across the community. In addition, one of the goals under the Health and Housing Action Plan is to support economic development, and so the city provides that ongoing funding to the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation to support that, recognizing that stable income and workforce participation are key protective factors against housing insecurity. Poverty reduction is also supported through regional partners as well, including the Regional District of Nanaimo announcing free transit for youth in this summer 2026, which will definitely help our youth. Finally, I know Ms. Balpasing mentioned it and Ms. Brinkman mentioned it, but council plays a very important role in advocacy to our senior government for health care, for housing, for public safety and homelessness. That all supports with poverty reduction as well. So we can see that the progress under the Health and Housing Action Plan has been supported by substantial investments from all orders of government since its adoption. So I think these investments reflect the scale and complexity of health and housing and homelessness challenges. Between 2021 and 2025, more than $390 million was invested in Nanaimo to help with health and housing related initiatives. And as you can see from the table before you, the vast majority of this funding, over $366 million, was provided by BC Housing to support large-scale housing development and ongoing housing and support services. This underscores the critical role of senior government investment in addressing homelessness and complex housing needs. The city has contributed nearly $10 million directly, focused on targeted funding, prevention, systems coordination, grants, and enabling housing through tools, as Ms. Brinkman mentioned, DCC waivers, our online accommodation platform funding, and the role that we play through administration of provincial and federal grants. While smaller in scale, our city investments play a key role in leveraging that senior government funding, addressing the local gaps, and supporting frontline implementation. You also see up there the federal investments through the Reaching Home program have further supported local services and improvements. Taken together, you can see that we've had a substantial multi-government response. The levels are significant, but we know that the pressures continue to grow, which really reinforces the importance of strategic coordination, sustained funding, and effective use of our limited city funds. Attachment C provides a more detailed overview of the city-funded health and housing initiatives, including the funding that the city participates in administrating the federal and provincial grants as well. And I just want to note a few things in there. We talked a little bit about a housing legacy reserve. So we're not including the annual allocations that we put in there, just because that is a fund that we use to pay for some of these initiatives. We also haven't included long-term BC housing lease arrangements, which aren't necessarily direct costs, but constrain our future revenue. And we also didn't include any funding that we receive and we facilitate through Ministry of Emergency Management Climate Readiness for Emergency Response for vulnerable populations. So it's a bit of a conservative look and a scan as well. Oops. So just quickly, just touching on what a lot of us know are our current gaps and constraints. Funding stability remains a significant challenge. Core initiatives such as the Hub, as we know, Heart and Hearth, they're all short-term funding. So it creates uncertainty, limiting long-term planning. These pressures, as we know, have been intensified by our recent provincial changes, including reduced or deferred capital funding through the discontinuing of the Community Housing Fund, or the discontinued supportive rent supplements that they were also providing, and the more restrictive emergency assistance through the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction as well. And of course, funding instability also affects our city's capacity. So our temporary social development staffing participates in key systems tables such as the HRLT and local backbone coordination. Other gaps include our operator and workforce capacities as well. So we know our nonprofits, Indigenous and service delivery partners are operating at near or at capacity. And this can affect the service quality, data collection, the staff retention, program sustainability, and with the short-term funding, we see a lot of staff turnover as well. And so we have a loss of knowledge and of experience as well. While coordination has improved through the alignment project, many health and housing action plans are outside of the city's control. So as health investments or income supports, non-market housing data and timelines, progress is also constrained by limited non-market housing supply, lengthy project timelines, and challenges related to data access, transparency, and outcome reporting. And finally, we still have long-standing inequities persist. We've seen that from our homeless point in time count, with Indigenous people being overrepresented in the homelessness sector, the population. So just onto the funding context. So given the progress made under the plan and the gaps and pressures that remain, the committee is being asked to consider how available funding could be used to stabilize services, strengthen prevention and response, and address priority gaps. In addition to what I've mentioned earlier, the online accommodation platform funding and the contributions to the Housing Legacy Reserve Fund, the city has access to 2 sources of one-time funding that could support homelessness, health, and housing priorities. So the first source is the remaining SPO funds. The total up there includes the $188,995 in the city allocated SPO funds that are still remaining available. And we're expecting an estimated $490,000 in SPO funding to be returned to the city. But just please note that this return is a preliminary estimate, as final balances are still being confirmed at this time. The second source is the funding set aside in the Special Initiatives Reserve for homelessness and housing initiatives, and that current balance is $375,000. So together, these sources represent approximately just over $1 million in estimated funds, one-time funding, so subject to kind of our final confirmation through the SPO reconciliation and council direction. Next part, I'm just gonna go through the options. I know that the committee is gonna be hearing from other delegations today, so I figured we'd run through the options, we could look at the recommendations, and then we can always bring them back up after if that's the wish of the committee as well. So option A focuses on enhancing complex needs capability, particularly for individuals facing the highest levels of risk within the system. So this option could include capital support to reestablish a centralized hub or a navigation center, or if a permanent hub is not feasible in the short term, it could be used for seasonal warming services during the winter months. So that's kind of supporting people with the most complex needs. Option B would focus on initiatives, prevention initiatives. So that'd be helping people to remain housed and avoid homelessness. So potential investments could include expanding the rent supplements, especially in consideration of the cuts that we've seen from the provincial government. We could expand rent bank supports or other housing stabilization measures. This option could also support enhanced youth prevention, just building on the Nanaimo Youth Resilience Strategy as the federal funding concludes this year. Additional funding could be directed to social development grants where demand continues to exceed available resources through a time-limited top-up. So that could be a one-time or it could be, over multiple times, but just to top that up. And finally, option B could support poverty reduction initiatives, including advancing a food security systems approach, which is identified in city plan and the integrated action plan with a focus on vulnerable populations.
So option C is more related to supporting non-market housing projects. Sometimes it's the front-end works and services, like Claire had been talking about, that can be unexpected costs for non-market housing projects. So whether that's with BC Housing or nonprofit housing providers, so that is a way non-market housing could be supported with these funds. The funds could be put into the Housing Legacy Reserve, and then it is used in the future for either purchasing land or contributing to the purchase or gain for capital improvements for a project. Another idea is, I know we have recently talked about development cost charge reduction, so we're offering a 50% DCC reduction, but there may be some projects where you want to support more, and so there could be a grant program that a nonprofit housing provider applies for more support for DCC reductions, so the funds could be used in that way.
The next option looks at supporting alignment project deliverables. So potential investments can include funding to advance coordinated access improvements, shared data initiatives, system planning activities, or other targeted priorities identified by the Homelessness Response Leadership Table. So an example of that right now is that the Homelessness Response Leadership Table is preparing to submit the Community Homelessness Report to the federal government outlining priorities. This report will be submitted by May 30th, so there may be some opportunities within there to leverage funds as well. And option E looks at systems coordination capacity, focusing on the local. So potential investments could include extending the temporary staffing capacity in the social development team beyond the current end date of January 15th, 2028. Option E could also support limited startup or facilitation costs for specific systems planning initiatives or working groups where needed to address local gaps while avoiding duplication of provincially and federally led structures already in place. I don't see the recommendation slide up there.
Actually, through the chair, Ms. Wood, if I could ask Ledge to bring up the addendum PowerPoint. Ms. Wood was valiantly working off the other slides.
Okay.
And if we could please go to slide 16, because for members of the audience, not necessarily council, this slide referred, Ms. Wood referred some figures that you didn't actually see. So Ms. Wood, the rest of the community didn't see these slides, and I think perhaps if you could go over this one, and then you can go to your recommendation slide.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great, thank you. This is how prepared I am in my notes, that I don't have to look at the PowerPoint. Thank you. So for everybody watching at home or in the council chambers today, this is the updated table. And the information that wasn't there, that you probably didn't see, was the investment that BC Housing has made. The capital investment that you see from BC Housing, again, is, kind of the obvious ones that we talk about. So, all the non-market, supportive housing, temporary, also shelter. So that's funding there as well. And then the program investments would include, kind of all the operations that are supporting that. I think a big chunk as well under the capital investment that we may not think about is even, for example, the Community Housing Fund. They have a mixed income ratio of folks that live in there, and roughly about a third, depending on the breakdown, are deep shelter subsidy. So that also includes capital to top that up to be able to pay for the cost of the building as well. So it's significant, as you can see, over $366 million just between 2021 and 2025. Okay, I'll go to the recommendation slide here. Can you go to the, thank you. Thank you. So based on the committee's discussion and direction, staff will return with a follow-up report outlining more detailed cost estimates, implementation considerations, and anticipated outcomes for any of the funding options that council wishes to pursue further. It could be one or two, depending on what the discussion today brings and the direction that you give. And we're here to answer any questions. We could probably take some questions now, but I also know that we do have some delegations coming forward, so happy to follow the chair and the committee's wishes.
We'll take a few questions and then take a break and then come back and hear from the delegation. Cheryl, Councillor Armstrong.
Do the mic? No, it's on now. Just two questions. On the one you just showed the amount that BC Housing paid, do you have the amount they've invested in Nanaimo? Because I believe that was all provincial.
Sorry, through the chair, do you mean the investment that BC Housing
It
did?
was put into, the province has put into Nanaimo, because it sure hasn't been 366 million.
So the funds that the financial totals that we have up there are directly from BC Housing. So they're flowing through BC Housing as a corporation into Nanaimo. We didn't include any funding from other ministries such as Ministry of Health or anything like that.
So my question is, then you're saying that they've invested $366 million in Nanaimo?
That's correct. That's the information staff have received from BC Housing.
Does that include operational expenses and everything, or just?
Yep, it includes operational and capital.
Okay. And then my second question is you were talking about when you went to poverty reduction, you mentioned the free transit for youth. Have we looked at expanding that program to Nanaimo residents that are below the poverty level for a program similar under the LEAP?
Through the committee chair, I'm not aware of that, but I wonder if Ms. Balpel-Singh may want to answer some questions about transportation and LEAP.
Through the chair, LEAP does not include transportation.
No, I know that. My question is, have we looked at a program similar to LEAP so that we can help those that are at poverty or below access transportation at a reduced level?
Through the chair, I think I'd have to rely on Ms. Osborne for more details on that. I do know that we have synced in with the Regional District of Nanaimo and considerations about the LEAP pass with subsidized transit passes. And there are times where we actually have, for certain programs, provided bus passes, not necessarily the whole yearly one, but through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, we can get you details on that specifically.
Thanks. It's maybe something I'll refer to the accessibility committee for a later report. Thanks.
Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and through you, thank you for the presentation. I note you refer to the allowance of 4 housing units on 20,000 plus residential properties. So we actually have 20,000, well, not necessarily single-family lots, there may be duplex lots, etc., but available in the city. So in theory, if we've got 20,000 residents there, we could add another 60,000 residents, just assuming it was one person on their own, just if we infilled in accordance with provincial regulation now.
Through the chair, that is correct. And I know those numbers were presented to you probably at that time when the small-scale multi-unit housing rezoning changes were happening. But it is an astonishing number, and yeah, it does allow for lots more housing in Nanaimo on our residential properties.
And just, if I may, just to clarify, there's no question that there are 20,000. It's, you know, we've got some awfully small lots in town now. I've seen them. You can barely fit one house on them. So there's no question about that number.
No, through our GIS analysis, we can confirm that that is correct.
Thank you very much.
Great. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for the presentation. First, I just want to express my regret that we didn't collect the SPO files, and I wish that we had written in some contractual language around receiving those files. I feel like that's a bit of a miss. Sorry, I have a few questions. The first is the homelessness response leadership table. I'm noting that there's no housing providers on that, and I'm just wondering if I can have a rationale for the composition of that committee.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Hemmens. There's approximately 35 agencies, and there are housing providers sitting at the homelessness response leadership table. So I don't have the exact list in front of me, but you know, service providers such as Nanaimo Family Life Association, Island Crisis Care, Connective, Pacifica, they're all at the homelessness response leadership table.
My apologies, I totally misread the report. I thought it was Nanaimo, Tillicum.
No, so through the chair, good question. So that's a local backbone team. So that local backbone team is just tasked with doing the background work. So they're making sure that all the information from the different working groups are going to the homelessness response leadership table. They're making sure that all the agendas and the planning is all done. They're making sure that there's all this information going to the HRLT. They're monitoring the rollout of coordinated access and HIFIS. So they're kind of like in a collective impact model. They're a backbone team that are supporting the entire project.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Mackenzie, the 60 units in brackets coming soon, that's adjacent to 1030 Old Victoria. I
Yes,
think
that's
that could be problematic because we've assured the community that that emergency, that temporary housing unit would not exist with a supportive housing unit. And so, because that places 129 vulnerable people directly in that neighborhood. So I'd just like to, I guess, receive assurances that when we say coming soon, we have a staging process that includes 1030 Old Victoria no longer being in operation before those supportive housing units are built. Can you confirm the accuracy of my understanding there?
Yeah, through the chair to the committee, the information and the communication we've gotten from BC Housing and that they do not intend to operate both sites at the same time. And so that's the information that staff are working with BC Housing on that. don't have a lot of faith in that, I'm afraid. My final question, sorry, I'm looking for it here. Oh, the hub, and this is probably a conversation for after the delegation, but my inclination is to try to support that model because it was seen such success. However, I'm concerned about the dollar amount being enough or not enough. I'm also concerned the report did not address the reasons for the closure of the hub, which was neighborhood concerns. So if we are going to enter into that again, and I agree, a very valuable project, for me, there are going to have to be strong conversations about where it goes and what it means for community and what mitigation things we'll have in place if we go forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley and then Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you for the presentation. And the report is very in-depth. I appreciate that. I'm curious about why 250 Terminal wasn't on the list for supportive housing and affordable housing coming soon, because they're going through that process of rezoning and getting ready to build there.
It's true, that one could be on the list, actually, but I would say maybe it's a little further along in terms of the planning stages. I was really trying to focus on, we have a development permit, we're at building permit. I was really trying to focus on those ones that felt a bit coming sooner.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna wait a while
But
for that one yet.
it is on the list as well. It's part of our 2019 MOU sites.
Okay. And then just another question. I know that in Vancouver and I believe in Victoria, the province has funded the hub model there. We requested funding from the province here and we were told no. And then I think there was direction from this council to push for funding for the hub model, because really it's not going to make a lot of sense unless we can actually buy a building and have it renovated so we have showers and proper kitchen and proper facilities, laundry, etc., to make it actually work. And I'm just curious where we are in that advocacy with the province, and have we gotten anywhere, or is it just a flat no that we're getting back and they're okay doing it in other communities like Vancouver and Victoria?
Through the chair, to Councillor Manley, thank you for the question. I know that the hub service providers are working very hard to do that advocacy. Within the staff level, within this, even the homelessness response leadership table, there's been 2 meetings so far. There's a strong push to BC Housing staff who are there for the hub model and for looking for funding. And we have been informed by BC Housing staff that the hub proposal is now with the Ministry of Housing, and they're looking for direction from them. Some of the messaging we've received, of course, that other communities have received is that there are other communities that want hub too. So I think that the province is considering that from what we've heard. And I think right now there just isn't any new capital to be identified currently in the provincial budget. That's the information we've gotten from BC Housing staff, but that they're still considering the proposal.
Yeah, clearly it's a model that works, and it's a model that we need to integrate. And just having run a shelter myself and walking into that situation and just seeing people being warehoused and then having to fight tooth and nail just to have one person.
Sorry, Paul.
Just Councillor Manley.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Manley. Yeah.
Just to have to fight tooth and nail, just to have somebody coordinate, have a staff person to be able to coordinate moving people along. We got to stop warehousing people. We have to make sure that we're on a continuum of care and moving them through, and those that want to improve their lives need that opportunity to take those steps. So I hope that, I was actually quite shocked that we got a recommendation to a couple of operators that we look at 250 Albert by the MLA and the minister, and when there was no chance that was going to happen. I mean, that's just, it's unbelievable to me, but it is a model that works, and we should be pushing for more funding for this so that we can help those people that do need help and are seeking help. Thank you.
Great, sorry about that. Councillor Perino, thank you.
Thank you. Now I've cut myself there. Thank you, Chair. Great presentation, actually incredible, because it's so in-depth, so I really appreciate that. I have 2 very quick questions for you. just explain to me again the difference between, I know what the rent supplement program is. What's the difference between that and the Nanaimo Region Rent Bank? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, through the chair. Good
Yes.
question, Councillor Perino. So the rent supplement program, the city one, so
Yep.
there are different rent supplement programs. So
Yes.
just to be clear, BC Housing has one that they have 2 or 3 different rent supplement programs, but the city one is really meant to top up people's income
Yes.
on an ongoing basis, to create essentially affordable housing within the private market rental that they're in.
Right.
The Nanaimo Region Rent Bank is meant to support low and moderate income family households to avert a short-time crisis. So maybe something's happened, they've had a health issue, or, you know, their car is broken down and they can't afford to pay their rent. That is one-time loan. It's a forgivable loan, but they do work on a plan to get them to pay that back.
Perfect, thank you. I just had lost that one. The SPO, the funding source that you talked about, the approximately 679,000, did I hear you right to say that we may be able to receive as well about 400,000+ should that work out? Is that correct? So in other words, it would be it'd be over $1 million.
Through the chair, to Councillor Perino, the 3 funding kind of totals that you saw on the slide, I don't know if you can go back to the SPO slide. So one of them, the 188,000 approximately, is from the city allocated funds that were intended to go to the SPO for 2026 funding.
Right.
The $490,000 in remaining is an estimate, and that was what was in the SPO bank account, and we're expecting that funding back.
Okay.
And then the 375 is from the special initiatives reserve.
Okay.
So all total, just over $1 million.
Okay, good. And when you talked about the option A, where you talk about the hub, the biggest initiative, of course, with the hub is trying to find a location which we do not currently have.
Yes, through the chair, the locations, there are some potential locations, but again, we've reported to this committee in the past that you either have to purchase or there's some extensive renovations that are needed to allow it to operate efficiently and effectively.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Perino. So we'll take a 10-minute break here and reconvene at 3:15. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for your patience.
They both collect rainwater. One has a fish stamped on it. That's telling me that it's unprocessed and it goes directly to an environmentally sensitive area. This is the outfall, so anything that you put in that catch basin is ultimately going to end up into the ocean. If you have any questions about where to take your unwanted wasted products, such as paint products and petroleum products, you can contact the City of Nanaimo at 758-5222. You can also go on.
Reconvene, and the next item on the agenda is the delegations from Bob Moss, Keith Wilson, Colin Stansfield, and Levin Callawart. So please come on up. I guess it's presenting in sequence, so don't feel obliged to be standing the entire time. Come up when.
We thought we could have some fun with that, but first of all, good afternoon, Mayor Krogh and councillors. Really appreciate the chance to have some time to present to you this afternoon and hopefully deal with some questions afterwards. So, and because this is a joint presentation, as Councillor Gesselbrecht has announced to everybody, the 4 of us are together, and I'll lead off, and then we'll take turns. So, and you can save your questions till the end if you would, please. So I'm here as a representative for Nanaimo Housing Working Group, which, as many of you might know, came together early in 2025, a great collection of community organizations and individuals who are keen to see more non-market housing. So the Nanaimo Housing Working Group believes that while, hold on, I suppose I have to click the slides. Do you want to do slides? It'll probably work better that way. One more. There we go. And one more. So the working group believes that while the private sector continues to play an important role in the provision of non-market housing, or market housing, I should say, the efforts of government and nonprofit organizations are essential to address the growing need for affordable housing or non-market housing in our city. The working group also supports collaboration with the city and community housing providers in order to urgently address the non-market housing needs of our citizens. And just a bit of detail on the working group. So current members are Nanaimo Youth Services, Island Crisis Care Society, Bolinas Housing, Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, Salvation Army, Nanaimo Association of Community Living, Nanaimo Foundation, Coastal Community Credit Union, AYPQ Architecture, our chair, Dave Whitty, who's happily holidaying in Portugal right now, and several members, several Nanaimo residents who have been keen supporters of our objectives. So it's been a very fun and growing group, and everybody's very focused on trying to achieve the goals. So our working group is here to propose a practical action plan that our city can undertake to address the desperate and growing needs for non-market housing. And I think something that we all need to kind of remember is that those in need include some of our parents, our aunts and uncles, our siblings who are struggling to meet the costs of living, our adult children who are struggling to meet the same costs, and our employees who can't afford market rent. So as we think about that, these are the members of our community who will become unhoused if we don't take steps to provide the housing that they can afford. And as caring citizens of Nanaimo, in my belief, we have an obligation to help. What we are currently doing is not adequately addressing the challenge, and we're losing ground on the non-market housing piece. Yes, senior levels of government share responsibility for this, and our city can, but the important part is the city can drive change by working with nonprofit providers, identifying the housing projects, lobbying senior levels of government for funding, because I think we all understand that there's going to be increasing funding available, and then facilitating speedy advancement of projects. Yes, we're going to have to do things differently and take some risks. If we look at the world around us, the organizations and municipalities who are making significant progress are those who embrace new ideas and take the risks. We can learn from our experience with systems planning organization, and we can build on that knowledge. As you're aware, the working group has advocated for a separate city agency designed specifically to deliver on non-market housing targets. Thanks to Councillor Gesselbach, we were introduced to Lieven Calwart and John Kay, who together lead Anchor, an organization which can drive delivery of new non-market housing targets. Anchor shares the working group's belief that we need to do things differently and take some risks in order to achieve the necessary supply of non-market housing, both in Nanaimo and throughout BC. The working group believes that working together with Anchor, Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, and City Council to form a living lab and get underway immediately is the right step forward. So with that, I'll invite Keith to come to the microphone. Coming too quick, or you got it?
I think I Good afternoon. We're not here today to ask the housing question you've been asked many times before. We're here with what we believe may be the answer to that question. But first, let me take a minute to tell you about two young people that came through NYSA last year. The first, Lindsay, was a young woman with lots of challenges. She took our Blade Runners program, rented a place at Row House, and found a job with the help of our job coach. After working for 6 months, she was ready to move into an apartment. After looking for an affordable place for months, she moved to Calgary because she got better pay. and paid less rent. The other person I'm thinking of came to us as a practicum student who was finishing her criminology degree at VIU. Tara was a quick learner and worked out as a great fit for our organization. At the end of the practicum, we offered her a permanent job. She turned it down because the pay level wasn't enough for her to pay rent and all the other bills, and she found a good job in Edmonton, and so she went. My point in each of those stories is not actually about housing, although that is at the heart of it. It's about the economics of housing and its effect on Nanaimo's well-being as a community. It's about the 7,500 families who every month are precariously housed due to their rent costs. They're not contributing to the economy, they're just getting by. It's about the 98% that are priced out of the housing market. They're spending grocery money, utility money, gas money, all on housing, not on the things that contribute to a healthy, growing community. And before we get into the proposal, I'd just like to say one thing about the SPO. That experiment taught this community something important. Good intentions and local capacity alone are not enough. What was missing was a proven model, a clear deliverable, and a governance structure with real teeth. We did not have those things 4 years ago, but we do have all of them today. The SPO failure isn't a reason to hesitate. It's the reason we built today's proposal the way we did. We understand that you may have concerns about this proposal because it does carry some risk. You should be reminded, though, of the risks of not moving quickly on truly affordable housing. Those 11,000 vulnerable families identified in the Housing Needs Report, the 0 units of social housing starts on the record last year, and the reality that housing costs have outpaced wage growth by a factor of 5 to 1 for ownership and 3 to 1 for renters over the past decade. Those issues are a risk that won't go away until something significant is done. Thank you. Colin?
Good afternoon. So, I'm here today on behalf of NPC because we believe that workforce housing is foundational to economic development. As we've just heard, a large share of Nanaimo's workforce can no longer comfortably access either rental or ownership housing. The economic issue is what those numbers mean in practice. A full-time minimum wage worker now falls more than $8,000 short of what's needed to comfortably afford market rent in Nanaimo. That's before groceries, before transportation, before childcare or any other living costs are considered. They're already down $8,000 a year just trying to keep a roof overhead. And in fact, it's $12,000 if you took a number out of the Nanaimo News Bulletin last week. Staggering. And the challenge doesn't stop at minimum wage. The median income for a one-person household in Nanaimo is roughly $40,000 annually. At that income level, affordable housing costs sit at approximately $1,000 per month, nearly $700 below average market rent. For many workers, housing security now depends on dual incomes, shared housing arrangements, intergenerational support, or extended commuting. At the ownership level, even dual living wage households are now sitting at the threshold of townhouse ownership in Nanaimo's current market. And that's if they can hustle up a down payment and if they can qualify for a mortgage. What used to feel attainable for so many working households no longer consistently does. And we need to be laser focused on that because talent chooses where a stable and dignified life still feels attainable. And so at a certain point, this stops becoming a marginal housing issue and becomes a workforce competitiveness issue. To be clear, this isn't about dismissing the work already happening across the system. This afternoon, we've heard about initiatives underway through staff and community partners, including the Alignment Project, coordinated access work, prevention initiatives, support of housing delivery, and investments in complex needs response. Real progress being made in several areas, and continued investment in homelessness response and complex needs supports remains essential. At the same time, the housing pressures now extend much farther into community than they did even a few years ago. When you heard before about rent supplements being needed for low and moderate income, that now extends into average income bands. People working part-time while living with disabilities, seniors on fixed incomes who continue working into retirement, educational assistants, care aides, retail supervisors, trades apprentices, and many early career professionals are all competing for the same shrinking pool of attainable housing. Workforce housing increasingly includes the people who keep communities functioning day to day. These are the frontline workers, the caregivers, the skilled trades, the service sector workers, younger households trying to establish themselves locally. And when large portions of the community can no longer reliably access stable housing, the effects show up everywhere. It's workforce retention, it's institutional capacity, it's community health, business continuity, and long-term economic resilience. The staff report itself identifies ongoing constraints around non-market housing supply, operator and workforce capacity, fragmented funding environments, and lengthy project timelines. Many of the recommendations the committee just saw also do not directly center the housing shortfalls tied most closely to labor attraction, retention, that institutional stability I mentioned, and long-term resilience. It's not a criticism of the work underway at all, but housing systems perform different functions simultaneously, and the pressures emerging across the workforce and middle-income portions of the continuum require additional tools, partnerships, and delivery approaches. That's what this proposal is about: new tools, new partnerships, and a new approach to delivery. This proposal aligns closely with why NPC was created in the first place: to do with partners what the city would otherwise struggle to do alone. NPC was designed to help align partners, intelligence, and delivery capacity around complex regional priorities, to strengthen coordination where systems have become fragmented, and to move strategic ideas into practical action. Housing is squarely in this category. What makes this proposal worth exploring is that it does not approach housing as a single, isolated problem. It attempts to intelligently connect pieces of the system that normally operate separately: land, financing, construction, manufacturing, governance, and long-term community benefit. Part of that includes exploring newer construction approaches that have the potential to reduce costs, shorten timelines, and improve delivery consistency. Part of it is the opportunity to establish manufacturing and production capacity here in Nanaimo, not only helping support local housing delivery, but potentially positioning Nanaimo to support projects elsewhere on the island or throughout the region. That means investment, industrial activity, and skilled jobs tied directly to solving local problems. The proposal also explores access to forms of capital that operate differently from conventional, scarcity-based funding programs. Part of what's being explored here is whether Nanaimo can attract additional investment and build a model where success helps fund success over time. And importantly, some of the policy and systems innovations being explored here are not limited to non-market housing. Done right, the lessons learned through this pilot project will provide insights capable of improving coordination, efficiency, and delivery conditions across the broader housing ecosystem, including parts of the private market. None of that guarantees success, but it does create a credible case for structured experimentation, practical partnership building, and serious exploration. So with that, I'll hand things over to Lieven and the Anchor team to introduce themselves and the project.
Thank you, Colin. And I'm the smallest of the gang, so I hope I can still come out of this screen. And I want to go back first to the presentation we heard from staff also on housing. I was really impressed. So for me, there's a lot of things new here, but I think it's so important to see these things that happen and the progress that has been made. And it was impressive to see what you guys presented. And how did I land here together with these beautiful men? So it was also through a presentation that was brought by Councillor Giselbracht also on our island. So I'm a Bowen Island resident, on circularity. We bumped into each other. We also met each other before on the island resilient REAP. There I was a keynote speaker. And what brings me here is also to see, like in the housing markets, there's good news and bad news right now. Starting with the bad news is this problem we face right now makes a lot of people depressed. And it's not only here. I am very fortunate to live in a very conscious community on Bowen, but I'm also a global citizen, so I'm working on housing in 2 continents, so that's Europe and here. The problems are similar everywhere. So it makes no sense to keep on looking for the solutions we already tried, because we keep on getting stuck. That's the bad news. The good news is there's possibility. And the reason that I'm here is because I'm very, very keen on where we land to support projects or not. And the possibility is here. And why? I'll also want to show that in a minute. Why is because after 4 or 5 weeks of talking, we stand here also as a collective, much more than us alone as Anchor. Because the values and the principles I met through Colin and his board also with the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporations are so aligned to what needs to happen that it gave me a lot of courage. Oh, wow, how can we go on? The work you guys have been doing with the working group is so aligned, but also so courageous to pick it up, even in a voluntary role, that I said, wow, what's going on? And so going into where we are, very important from our point of view, building houses, that's all about engineering and planning. And my kudos for you being in your chair. If I hold up the technicalities of water, of bylaws and all of these things, it requires a lot of things to make stuff happen. With housing, a community is all about social architecture. And that's also why I was so impressed with your presentation of staff. It's connecting the dots between many different organizations, many different places, and make sure that you can create something meaningful out of that. And there is where the housing market is broken. So there's the housing crisis, we always look to one thing, costs, but cost comes from different angles. And so building it up, the construction cost, also in Nanaimo, has made it impossible to build. We can look to non-market, but the market is also on a big standstill. Here, Vancouver, Bowen Island, everywhere. You can go to very remote areas, and there you don't have these problems, but it's volatile. So there's no current developer that is capable of promising fixed prices due to the volatility in the whole supply chain. So how can you secure that this is coming stronger? A second one is land. So the construction cost is about double of the price what it should be also to build affordably. Land cost takes about half of the pricing to 1/3 of the pricing also in costs for housing. How should we take that out of the equation? There's so many examples worldwide. Look to the Scandinavian countries and to others where land is part of the community. Community land trusts are there. It's so much part of your story. How do you keep land in the hands of the community in one way or another so that the cost is not a cost but a long-term investment in what belongs to a community, and that's its lands. That's a shift in thinking. And you save a lot of money and you open the door for 10 to 20% of the people to have an affordable home. The ugly one is the third one, and that's funding. The finance cost for housing is the one that makes housing truly unaffordable. 1% difference in the pay on capital and the interest on capital makes the prices spike with 20 to 30% in the long run. And we never look into that. So we need new financial solutions that work. If I hear how much capital has been raised also by BC Housing, that's great. But for the moment with BC Housing, there's a waiting line from 1 in 50. One project gets approved of the 50 questions they receive. And the whole system is getting completely transformed. It's needed as well, because they can't cope with that anymore. How do you solve that with true conscious capital? And the last one is that you need a community-operated system. A system that is in the hands of the community, that creates labor, that creates security, that creates also a belonging to the people that are a part of that. And that's exactly to the point of Colin, of Keith, and Bob. There's many people falling out that you really want to have here within 20 years' time and 10 years' time. So how can you create a safe space for that? And that's where, if you can start weaving these 4 building blocks around the local housing needs, and they are mapped very clearly, then you can really start mapping things out and moving things along. So what do we want to do, and how are we built, and what is Anchor? So we've been collecting, as what we call an extended enterprise, all of these different building blocks. So we work together with proven innovative solutions on building. Even in BC, there's great examples of constructors, of construction people and developers building at about 2/3 of the normal cost. How do you get them here to support building the new stock? There's new technologies we work with, proven technologies that go to half of the cost. How do you have a startup? Start them here in Nanaimo so that you don't only create housing, but also create employment in order to provide for this housing. The same for land. How can we be creative with different organizations to see that there's a kind of a land bank emerging where land remains in the community in one way or another? Donated, leased for 100 years, whatever it is. But the whole of Amsterdam is owned by the municipality, not by one single private entity. And that makes them move with plans whenever it's also needed. Does it make it affordable? Not at all. That's something else there. Funding is one of the biggest issues. We are working with global parties and also provincial and federal parties in order to have slow and conscious capital to the table at interest rates that go to half of what you ask right now in the market, and that can make you build something truly sustainable in the long run. And we didn't go through the numbers, but the numbers that are used and the numbers you have from staff, there's 8,000 units needed by 2040, 2045 to your assessments of non-market houses. We recalculated it this week, it's the double. With the current market rate, that 72% of the people living here cannot afford the rent, and 82% cannot enter the housing market by buying. That's huge. How can we shift that? And that's the boldness and the risk that is also mentioned by the colleagues. But we need to take risk in a kind of little cycles of success. And how can we go there? And so what makes this different? One, land stays here. Second, construction happens as much as you can locally, but also at prices that compete everything. Finances that serve the community. So really financial partnerships that help long term. And it's not only coming from the government anymore, that's not gonna work. And then governance that belongs here. And so going from that, there's a lot of partnerships, I won't go into depth, that we have built around that are all keen to collaborate here. So there's a lot of new technologies we are working on also to bring into the province, also together with the province, that can allow for faster building, cheaper building, and more sustainable building. We are connected to a lot of the cooperators, is a famous name over here. So the Cooperators Resilience Lab is also looking with us, how can we bring different financing to communities? Swiss Re is a big reinsurer, also located in Vancouver and in Switzerland. They work closely together to see how we can bring bigger capital to the table that lands in the community. Their first adagio is, if there's no need for foreign capital, don't use it. Try to use the local capital you have as much as you can. And that's what we will try to convene also in what we want to build together here. So there's a whole team with Anchor. There's a whole partnership and ecosystem Anchor. We are an extended enterprise, so you will not find one of these organizations all exist on their own. But we all pledged to each other, we want to solve this crisis together. We work hand in hand with communities that are ready to support them filling the gaps. So what we bring is that social architecture support. We bring the relationships. We help you weave these relationships together as well. We started with that already together in order to also start building. And that's the important thing. Our proposal together is, can we jump in? Can we have a primary budget that we will multiply also with grants in to start developing 400 complementary units to all the things the city is already building? The need is vastly more, but can we do that with the future in mind and with the end in mind, so that we design and develop inclusive housing formulas for here, and that we have an innovation hub? The partners of the prosperity corporations are important in that. Everybody is important, but can we do that and can we build, not only talk, not make big plans, but build and develop new tools and new ways of building here so that we can provide for the 20,000 units in total, not by us, but through the community, but that we have something that secures pricing, belonging, and the staying of the next generations over here. So our request, let's not go into that. We have a very specific methodology, and that's the Housing Action Lab. That's working in sprints, so we really want to create a very strict process to bring these parties together, to bring the local organizations together, and where needed, we bring other organizations in the mix to make it work. What we want to do and accomplish is that we create these 400 units together with the city, and that's also why we stand in front of you, to ask you into the partnership of the three of us already, because alone will never work. And we also have to have the courage to step over some bylaws and some other things together and speed up. But that's why you need each other, and that's why we need each other. So the Housing Lab, Housing Action Lab, is a very proven methodology we want to bring forward in order to also build a collective together with you also that stays here and that strengthens the forces. We have a plan to build these 400 units. We also look deep into that also with the working group, with the Prosperity Corporation. Our request is do that together with you, because otherwise it makes no sense. but also to focus on that and by that bring new solutions to the table. And with that, so there's a budget for that, there's a 300K ask. We want to multiply that budget with grants, so that's also part of the team. With that, we want to kick it off. We want to get it organized and secure that this fund is a rolling fund, that from that we can do much more together with the city, together with the housing group and the other partners stepping in. And our final ask, I hand over to Bob again to make the circle round. You want
That's
Pete
okay.
to
You can look
give
at
the
the
best?
rest. So thanks to my colleagues, I think you've had a pretty good outline as to what this project to deliver houses looks like. So one of the key things is the city of Nanaimo is a foundation to this organization. So the proposed partnership will work because of what the city brings to the table: legitimacy, land, and leadership. So what Nanaimo contributes: strategic and regulatory framework, and hopefully faster zoning and development approval, pre-zoned land, which the city is already working on, civic leadership. The city's participation will make partners and investors take this seriously. Community voice, representing some 23,000 households who need this affordable housing. And what Nanaimo receives: 300 to 400 units at approximately 40% below market within the next couple of years. A permanent living lab that our city owns. A governance structure unifying all local housing partners. Financial architecture that turns the initial cost of $300,000 into $1 or $2 million in the first 6 months. And a replicatable model positioning Nanaimo as BC's leading housing innovation city. So we'll get recognition around the province maybe. So that takes us to our 3 specific asks. The first one: partner with Anchor for the first 300 to 400 units. Designate Anchor as our housing development and ownership partner, activating the Nanaimo Land Bank that we already have we're already working on. Secondly, co-found Nanaimo Living Lab, city councillors to participate in this collaborative housing innovative platform. And thirdly, approve $300,000 for a 6-month activation sprint. This is not a fee, but a budget that delivers a governance structure, financial architecture, first building concept, and a full partnership map. As we have outlined, the community of Nanaimo has the vision, the land, and the strategy. Anchor brings the tools, the network, and the model. This is a creative new model which all 4 of us believe can be quickly started up to deliver affordable, non-market housing for our fellow citizens in need. We encourage council to embrace this creative new model and urgently take steps to activate the 3 asks. Let's work together, and if I may, let's get shit done. Thank you for that, and we'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation, and we can take questions from council now. So Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I took this off the AI, so it's AI generated, but it says the average now to build a 1 unit, 450 square feet, is $500,000, and they're expecting that to go up between $305 and $450 a square meter. How would you propose to get 35 units in for your $10 million?
So I think Levin addressed some of that, and perhaps I should ask him to answer that question. But part of the solution to that is a creative building strategy. So I'll pass that over to Levin.
So what we presented is we really want to work constantly on the 3 different pillars where you can cut costs. Getting land out of the equation is one, but the building cost is a big one. And so bringing builders here and building builder technologies here so that we can go lower into the cost is a preliminary one. And that's also one of the big advantages we have with the team, to bring these things in. and to look to the ones we can apply already now. So that's for the short term for these units. Having creative financing around that is a second one. So that's the two most important ones to your question, but that's the ones we need to invent together. And it's also going to depend, so the multi-unit building will be the solution for many, many things. Aging in place, caring in place, but also in order to live a different life. But dropping that down will be a joint effort also to look with these technologies, to look with the land we have, and also to look with the finances we can provide. Finances is also like, it's a tricky one, it's not a tricky one. From the moment we can how to these 300-400 units, you talk about 160 to 200 million. That's a different ask to financiers, to willing to invest in a community long term, and that requires a dialogue. So there's different steps to your question and different steps to take, but the very straightforward answer is technology, bringing the price down of building cost, because then your asset is cheaper, but cannot be cheaper in quality. The quality needs to remain, and that's why you need a living lab, to really bring that to fruition.
Okay, and then my next question and last question is, what would the liability be for the city? I've been following what's going on in Toronto and other places that have that, and the liability keeps increasing. If you can't answer it now, I can get that information at a later date. I'll get that at a later date, thank you.
Great, thank you. Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Going back to one of your slides, the first 400 units, what 2026 looks like. So the city's got to come up with the land. That's the basic proposition. And I assume you're not looking for one large chunk. You're looking for several, as opposed to putting 400 units potentially on one site. Is that fair to say? And the second thing is,
yes,
doing the rough math, 160, 200 million fund, so that's for the construction. So by my calculation, you're talking $400,000 to $500,000 a unit. That's pretty basic math. Are you contemplating that they're all going to be one bedroom? Are they going to be studios? Is it a mix? In other words, what's the deliverable at the end of this for 400 units?
Yeah, fair question. So that's part of the work that we're going to have to do in the next phase is think about that. But yes, likely it's going to be a combination of sizes and configurations.
And my impression from my discussions with some folks is that although there'd be certainly employment created here in Nanaimo, we would be relying on some outside expertise in companies, correct? Who would come into the community and undertake this kind of construction, which is relatively specialized in the sense that they've made it work other places, I presume, and you think you can repeat it here.
Correct, and there might be an opportunity to advance some of the local skills to create even more interesting organizations that can benefit more than just this particular project.
And if I can just add on to that, already last week we were chatting with one of these companies who's had a very specific ask about the number of square feet that they're looking for, industrial land, the opportunity to open up a factory here, creating about 150 new jobs. And so the intention is, yes, to bring in these technologies to make sure that learning stays here and that we're investing in the ability to keep doing it here.
And I appreciate that, and if I may, Chair, but throwing up a factory doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely.
And you're talking about something that's much longer term than the prospect of getting 300 to 400 units in a couple of years.
Absolutely. It's taken us decades to get into this problem. It's going to take us decades to work our way out, and it starts in the first 6 months of a sprint to 300 to 400 units.
And I take it some of this may reflect a sort of modular housing approach. What work have you done, if any, with the Modular Housing Association in British Columbia already, Paul Benetti and those folks?
So NPC has been involved in VICETA, the Vancouver Island Coast Economic Developers Association, and a few years ago we went through a large review of all the different modular housing providers that exist on the island and on the Sunshine Coast as well, and are looking to update that work again to make sure that we're making the best use of it. At the time, what we found was most of it was dedicated towards more sort of luxury offerings in coastal properties. Sort of, so you bought a property, would you like to just drop a bunkie? It wasn't focused on this workforce housing that we're realizing is so imperative right now.
Great. Councillor Manley?
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation. Actually, the mayor had most of my questions. So we would be looking at multiple sites. It's to start with, it would not be modular. It would be modular somewhere else, other site where they're already manufacturing modular units that follow an architectural plan, an engineering plan. So there's already is there a model out there that we could look at that's already existing?
Yeah. What we have, so Innovation Building Group, for example, is one of our close allies, and they are the ones, when you look also in BC, that have built at the best price point, quality point for the moment. Their system is a pre-qualified, semi-prefab thing, but they have the whole supply chain secured on sustainability and materials. So BC level. It means that this is much more secure than other ones. They can come over here also, and they can co-build with partners that are over here that want to build. So the whole model, to the point also of the mayor, is we have been creating a whole bracket of what we call community-based solutions. So it's technologies that you can bring in a community, train people with, and start implementing. IBG and its solution can be one that is immediately implementable. So it's all going to depend in these sprints. So also these sprints we want to do in the Living Lab is exactly to bring all of these puzzle pieces together. What kind of land do we have? What are the amount of units and the sizes of the units we need now for the upcoming period of time? And who is ready to build? And that's why you need a collective. If you want that resilience and agility, that's why we work from a collective as a collective. And there's two communities we want to weave together. That's the local one. If there's a party that can deliver for that price point, that can deliver immediately, please let's endorse that and let's support it as much as we can. So don't bring on other parties. If we need other parties to kick it off, let's do that. And that's the whole work of structured collaboration also together in these upcoming 4 stages we mentioned there as well, starting from the moment we are ready together. Will this be, these will be first build solutions. There's a lot of other solutions you can bring to the table, like 3D printing, like modular housing. There's a lot of things happening on the federal level that might shift the gears as well, but we need to be agile and open to that, and that connection is there. So that's also what I hope we can bring to this place as well.
So we've had a couple of modular buildings go up for supportive housing, and is that the same kind of model that you'd be looking at? Is there a predetermined type of architecture that fits on a certain size site? Or would you be adaptable to different types of sites? I mean, there's a few sites around town I can think of right off the bat. One of them's kind of triangular, but I'd love to see something go up at a commercial and terminal at the old Gene Burns building for one. We have other sites that are a little more square or rectangular, but is there are there preset types of models?
There's presets, and they are available, and there's also a lot of adaptability that can happen. So it's really like modular. There's not a fixed vision on modular. Modular is very flexible. The way why we build modular is because of reducing of costs, is because of sustainability, and then you bring in the different tools that work here. So we only bring things that are approved here, but it needs to go fast. It needs to be a model for the future. IBG is one, Reframe is another one. So that's a micro factory that we are working with. We still need to approve for BC, but they drive down the cost by half by creating local employment and then go into the sites, and they are very flexible in what they build. And I can go on and on and on, but that really requires land, that requires us seeing what the requests are, what is the first 300-400 units you want to build, but do that as a collective. And I also want to be very humble. We are connectors. We connect, we know damn well what plays in the market, but we are not the only ones having all the knowledge. We really need a collective to come to fruition for success. Without any contribution and collaboration with the city, nothing will happen. So how do we really that from a place of true, generous collaboration and desire of solving this? And that's going to happen together, not alone. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. Really interesting. One of the things I'm curious about, it sounds like Christmas morning. In 2 to 3 years, we can have 300 to 400 units at 40% below market rates. And I'm understanding that we can potentially reach that target through innovation and technology and new partnerships. I get that piece. Have we overlaid the city's available land with this idea that we can build 300 to 400 units? And if so, I'm hoping someone on the team has done some sort of land analysis to say that, yes, this is a good number that we can rely on as accurate for this pilot.
I think the quickest answer to that is the information that we got earlier about the social housing rezoning that's going along, I guess, Terminal and the highway. I can't remember the number that you said, but there will be
This is
thousands
the
of-
pre-zoning.
Yeah.
I see. So accessing the pre-zoning. And
Yep.
do you know how much of that potentially pre-zone land the city owns?
Sorry?
Sorry, we're going to pre-zone that land, and we're saying this could be potential parts of the land bank. Is that city-owned land, or is it?
No, and
my
I don't,
understanding a lot of
think
that's private.
our proposal isn't necessarily just city-owned land. There's no reason why a property owner couldn't take a position to get property that they own developed as well. That part of the discussion that I think isn't being brought forward enough here is that this is to create the conversation to develop all of these points. The housing hub that's being proposed here would be the group that sits down and sort of does all the fine print, sorts out where the properties would be, how they would be developed, what the costs would be, who the financial support is going to come from, all of those questions. But I think it's important that you understand that you need that group before you can figure out whether we're going to build at Commercial or on Albert Street or wherever.
Okay, I just think it's a really bold statement to say that we could build 300 to 400 units in 2 years at 40% below market rate, but not have land identified, or not to say that that's a secondary step to what we're doing here. And
Yep.
I don't mean that critically at all. I really love new ideas coming forward, and I'm really excited by the partnership I see in front of me. But I'm finding myself just a little bit skeptical because it feels like Christmas morning. If you guys can do this, I want to give you money right now. I'm just curious. I need to understand what the next steps are to validate it for myself.
Well, I think you're right, it is a bold statement, and it may not happen, but I think on one of the slides we talked about in the rest of 2026 was all of those steps are going to be ironed out. It may mean that you come back to council in 6 months and say it's only going to be 150, but that's 150 more than we got right now, so.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to add one thing to that,
Please.
because you're absolutely right. But in the last 6, 7 weeks since I've been walking here, it's not about land that the municipality needs to own. It's about finding community partners that want to provide land or possibilities where we can build on. And in the last 6, 7 weeks that I've been walking here and meeting people, there's a lot of organizations that are either sitting on land or want to provide land, and that's what the land bank is all about. If I look to some other projects that we conduct, it's bringing land together, and that's a land bank. But it cannot all be on the shoulders of the city, because that's impossible. And that's also why a lot of these projects and a lot of these initiatives stop, because we all expect the city to solve that. It's impossible. This really needs a collaborative to solve that, and that's the same with the land. But is this a crucial one? It's a crucial one. I don't have a clue at all, because I live a little bit further away. But it's going to require a common brainstorm, and also gifting from the people and the community, but also from the bigger organizations to see where can we make this happen. And it's true, it's a bold statement. But if you see how many people, and I got 6 children myself, if you see how many people are getting out of markets and need to move for the wrong reasons, I think it's not time anymore not to be bold. But we need to be realistic. And that's also why we want to start with the pilot together, and not with a big vision again, because that's not going to solve anything. We need to prove that we can build 300-400 houses, and that's the focus. And will we succeed? Yes, we will succeed. How? There's no direct line, but that's the honesty also. So, but that's also why the pilot is key, to start with the pilot and then see what the future solutions are, and not the other way around.
Thank you. I appreciate your honesty.
Thank you, Councillor Hemmens. Councillor Manley?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just curious whether the working group has reached out to any of the faith-based organizations in town that do have land.
We've only just started, and so, I mean, we've had 11 meetings as a working group that started with 8 people having a cup of coffee and have grown considerably since then. And I think what's unique about that, in each case, it's an institution, it's an organization, it's an individual who hasn't found a place to tie into all the great work that is happening with housing right now in the city. So much of that great work exists that you heard with the province, with the federal government, with local city staff, working in very prescriptive tables that have not had broader participation or been able to be found by others. And so what we're finding is there are a lot of people, and you heard the stories here today, it's the children who aren't able to afford to move out, it's the parents who aren't able to downsize, it's the working poor who are looking for places to live. All of these stories are touching all of our families. People want to know how to participate, and so we're finding out from private employers, from faith-based organizations, that they have access to land. And we expand what we mean by we. Suddenly we get ourselves into a sort of an abundance mindset relative to the scarcity of we only have X or Y. And there's in fact a lot of resources that we can bring to bear, and that's what this is about. It's about creating that space for the exploration of how we deliver housing, whether we're a faith-based organization or a private employer, with land and resources that we have to serve those who right now aren't able to attain affordable housing.
Yeah, I'm just
A long-winded version of it, yes?
I'm just thinking about the Brecken example. I mean, if they had, I think, a little more guidance in the beginning, there was some problems that they had with the developer that they had, and probably with a little more guidance and some expertise steering them along, they could have had a better experience. And there are other organizations in town that I know of that do have land, that have thought about this, but don't have the wherewithal or the ability to even dive into that. We do have land here in the city. We've got a chunk of land on Franklin, a parking lot that we've been trying to get somebody to build on for a number of years. We've got the Gene Burns site. We've got the site at Pine Street, waiting to see what happens with BC Builds. There's properties around town that the city owns, that faith-based organizations own, and that companies own. And yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and it's just the idea of bringing it together. I'm impressed to see the group of people that are and the organizations that are listed in this working group, and so I just really appreciate what you're bringing to the table here. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Manley. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. Just following up on what you said, Mr. Stansfield, about we know that there's a lot of workers that can't afford to live here. I just was reading on Facebook some that actually went down to Victoria because wages are higher and rents are cheaper. Have you looked to the companies, especially those in construction, that may be willing to help, or are you not at that stage yet? Because I just think about, I look at Tim Hortons that are now applying to temporary workers because they can't find local workers, but it's because I believe part of the reason is workers can't find low rents.
Right. So when we've had this very question with local builders in the development community, they've said that we have the capacity here to do the building. That, when we hear about at recent presentations to council that so many builders are in layoff positions right now, there are bodies here available to build this housing. It's about making sure that we have the projects in place to keep them working, and it's also about helping teach some of those developers and builders about the non-market approaches that help to preserve affordability over time. And so they have the skills and capacity to build it, and we're just talking about different ownership models. And so the answer to your question is yes, there is the capacity to build it.
Thank you. I know there's a really good program in Calgary you might want to look at that's had lots of success.
Perfect.
I'm not seeing any other questions, and I know we've got the presentation. There's a set of options for the Health and Housing Action Lab, for the Health and Housing Action Plan that we need to review. I think this conversation will be tied to it. So I think we can, if there's no more questions for the group, I do have one question actually, and it's just around the IBG building group. And so I actually came in contact with this developer through a parallel process. I was doing some tree work for friends, and they're like, oh, our uncle builds out in Whistler and Pemberton and is into modular building and is doing houses for multifamily buildings for like ridiculously cheap. But that they can, they have the rating that they can heat or cool a house, for Death Valley and keep a house warm for, the Northwest Territories. So anyway, I talked to this gentleman, and it was like, yeah, they're building a multifamily buildings for like $320 a square foot, which compared to what's being built now, it's like $600, $700 a square foot. And they've done it in Pemberton, in Golden, and they're actually kind of like, you know, upended the market a bit in Pemberton because these condos are going on for sale, and that's what people are buying there because nobody can afford anything else because they've dealt with that construction part. But I was pleased to see that they are on one of the companies that you are associated with, and being able to mobilize even that. I mean, I think they build like 40, 80 unit buildings, and they do some aspects of modularity, and then just through the building process been refined for many years. And it was very interesting hearing this gentleman talk about, you know, how these buildings are designed around the construction process as opposed to top down with architecture, then engineers, and then trying to translate into building where a lot of the inflationary problems occur. Is this a company that we could potentially come in here and help us out in the short term, say for a smaller project, given that, you know, other manufacturing facilities or whatever being brought in would take more time?
Rod Nadeau is the owner and the partner. And so, yes, what they have been developing is an approach and a building kit. So to know very strictly how to build in order to have that price point, but also a stepping code for. So that's their amazing product. And how they came along is because we do a constant scanning also through Jay. So that's our technology innovator, to see what is best on the market. And they are the best solution right now in order to tackle that. What we are doing, so we provide some developers for them also. So we do exactly the same thing. So they also then look locally on how can we create development. This would require us and the sprint to bring their technology together and to see whether this is the perfect fit for purpose and who can start working with that here, so that you have a solution locally also to build at that low price point. But also with that quality, because these houses are amazing. It's a $25 a month tag also on costs for heating and cooling. That's it, and electricity. So they are very, very good. And there's better ones. There's even better solutions to the table as well. But Rod is willing also to co-invest and see how this can land also here in Nanaimo. These conversations are daily conversations.
Great, thank you. And the second question is just, there's multiple names. There was a Living Lab, I think, Housing Action Lab on the slides. And I guess, you know, work that was started with the SPO has identified that, you know, we're not meeting even close our non-market housing needs, and that was a big gap even for dealing with homelessness here because there's just there's nowhere to transition people into, and we're losing workers, blah, blah, blah. So that Collier's report that was talked about was basically, it was like a land analysis, and then it was a facilitated process of bringing different groups together to figure out what would a non-market housing delivery system look like. But this Living Lab or Housing Action Lab, is that what we're discussing? Is that basically this is a place that the city, you know, that people would come together to collaborate and try to pull in those different pieces on projects, be it the construction end, also pulling together the land and that. Can you just speak a little bit more about that part of the proposal and the Housing Action Lab or Living Lab and how it's related to a delivery system?
So yes, I think it's exactly that, the second, the latter. How do you bring people together to discuss all the different components that are required to be able to build missing middle and non-market housing? I think what we heard about before in terms of that whole system conversation, I think it could certainly grow to become that, and as we achieve success, it will draw that in. But what you're hearing about right now is a very successful model of collective impact that's happening through the Alignment Project. But the Alignment Project isn't touching the missing middle and workforce housing. Right? And so right now, these things are happening in fragmented ways. There's nothing happening in the workforce housing space. And so it's taking that proven model of labs, pulling people together, doing the exploration, the stuff that isn't easily done inside of larger administrative organizations, but requires multiple sectors coming together to think creatively and be explorative about it. Over time, if it involved the entire housing spectrum, from shelters and transitional housing all the way up to single-family dwellings, that'd be great, but right now we want to make sure that we're being focused on delivering the piece where Nanaimo right now has a big zero sitting next to that annual target.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mayor Krogh, do you have another question?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Going back to the three asks, the first, formal designation of Anchor as housing development and ownership partner, activating the pre-zoned land bank Nanaimo already holds. What's contemplated in terms of the ownership Somebody's putting up a building, it's gonna have to be mortgaged, somebody's gotta own the land, somebody's gotta own the building, is it a long-term lease? What's the arrangement?
I mean, these are the things to figure out as you go forward, because it's going to take different strokes for different folks. There are multiple forms of non-market housing. You know, some of them are about community-owned assets, some of them are nonprofits, sometimes there are cooperatives. These are the things that are missing right now, and they each have then a material impact on what the ownership or rental model is. And so absolutely it's contemplating attainable home ownership and rentals, but the model from one building to the next, it's too early to say that there's one prescriptive model for it.
I'm not sure, as a guy who spent a fair bit of time practicing law, that I'm satisfied by that answer. Can you explain it a little further? At the end of the day, let's talk about the first project. Is it going to be on land that the city leases out to an entity, or is it going to be a transfer of ownership and we become an equity partner in something? Is this a sort of a housing development corporation? What's sort of the contemplation? I mean, I appreciate, you know, old Mao Zedong said, let 1,000 flowers bloom, but I still want to know what the flowers are.
And the discussions that we've had so far are that that's a conversation that needs to happen amongst all of the partners, and that it could be that different equity stakes are going out to people who contribute in different ways. But to jump to that right now becomes a very prescriptive step at the first when you haven't involved all of the partners. And so I hear you that that doesn't provide a concrete answer, and that's very deliberate. If we had a concrete answer, then it would be being implemented all over the place right now. And right now, there's not even contemplation that is happening throughout that middle space. And so it is about leaving space for those 1,000 flowers, I guess.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think it would be probably an appropriate time, I'm not seeing any more questions, to have the larger discussion. Oh, great. Mayor Krogh, questions for staff?
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, Ms. Bhopal Singh, Ms. Mercer, whoever, you've heard the discussion. And the proposal is that Anchor comes in to do this work. It's the city's money. How does that happen in a practical way?
I guess, Your Worship, I think the first question is, and you've heard a lot today about the role the city plays in providing affordable housing, everything from zoning to programs to keep people in affordable housing like rent banks and all that other work. Traditionally, we've left building housing to senior levels of government. So I think the first question for council is, do you want to get out of that traditional lane and into the lane of actually being more involved? Many communities are doing that right now. Across BC, as provincial money's dried up, and although there's announcement of a new federal program, it's really kind of loose on details on what that multi-billion-dollar federal program will be or how it'll roll out. So in a case like this, if council, rather than going back and looking at a traditional housing corporation, which the previous council, I guess, looked at a little bit, if you wanted to investigate this further, I think we'd have to come back to you. And my immediate reaction, I think where you're going with this question is, how do we direct award to a company like this? And I think that's challenging. I think the benefit here is that you actually have the Prosperity Corporation involved, and if it is something that council wanted to do, I think we'd have to explore how the Prosperity Corporation could play a role in the transfer of funds. So I think I'm trying to say we'd have to provide funding probably to an external organization rather than going through our own procurement policies, because we simply can't award a contract of that size directly. So.
Great, thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. I like some of the information I'm hearing, but I think I would benefit from a staff report, and I don't see any urgency to make a decision today, so I know somebody's got a motion prepared for that, so I'm just saying, like, I would prefer to get more information before I decide on any of the options looked at. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think a staff report would be a very appropriate step. And maybe we can open up the larger discussion on the health and housing action plan, or do we want to deal with this specific? Okay, so I do have a motion It can either be a notice of motion or we can just now, but it's basically asking for a staff report. I can send it to staff to put it up there and council can have a look at it and see if this is something that we'd feel comfortable passing now or doing a notice of motion. I think, you know, yeah, okay. So I just sent it, motion to you.
I think I had your motion from earlier, Councilor Gusserbrock. Is it the same motion?
With a different date. I think I put July 13th as
Okay,
opposed to June 15th.
So you changed the date to June 15th?
I changed it to July 15th, July.
Okay. And I'll just see if staff have that and can put that up. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I'll read it out before it's moved. Or we can just move it here, but I'll read it out. That staff meet with representatives of the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, the Nanaimo Housing Working Group, and Anchor Corporation to discuss the proposed activation pilot for a community-governed non-market housing delivery system and report back to council at the July 13th GPC with options. GPC with options for the city to fund and support the pilot as a founding partner, including a de-risked funding options that release city funds upon the completion of pre-negotiated project milestones with the goal of achieving the following objectives. 1, deliver 300 to 400 units of non-market housing. 2, secure 1 to 2 million in external grant funding and partner contributions. And 3, determine the structure for and launch a permanent, locally controlled platform for coordinated non-market housing delivery. Okay, seconded by Councilor Armstrong. So just to speak to it, this discussion about how to better deliver non-market housing in Nanaimo has been ongoing for a long time. We're not meeting close to our targets. I think we need to do 400 a year just for the non-market housing, and we're delivering maybe 50 to 100 per year. And then when you actually look at what the market is producing, you know, as it said, 72% of people can't afford, you know, the rental, and 82% can't afford, you know, to buy into the housing market because the market just isn't able to deliver housing cheap enough to be affordable. And so, you know, when the work with the SPO is clearly identified, like there's great coordination already happening in the community and with the Uniting Project, the Alignment Project. Those bodies are addressing homelessness and service provision, but there was a big gap in the non-market housing provision, and there was a need to look at land banks and looking at facilitating a process to bring together the different entities involved in the provision of non-market housing to look at how to coordinate financing, coordinate land, coordinate the construction development, and then the community governance around it. So when I met Anchor and I heard it was like Christmas, it's like we can find 2% loans from a reinsurer or cooperators. We've got builders that can build for $300 to $400 per square foot. You know, we want to help develop a community land bank and then work in a community-owned governance structure. That really is as a lab or can be potentially a development corporation, but an entity that basically can pull together those different pieces, the land, pull together the financing, pull together the construction and deliver it. And that coordination is was really missing. I'm a little bit gun shy about starting up an external organization and go, because we've tried that with the SBO, and basically it was like 2 years to come to agreement of what the organization would look like, then another 2 years to get the board, and then find the CAO, and then the organization gets going, and it was just like 6 years gone by, nothing accomplished. And so I really like the idea of just an activation pilot that's like, okay, if you guys think you can do this, the city is going to come together as a keen, committed partner. We're going to support the finding of land. We can support with an activation funding. But yeah, show us, secure us the 2% financing, secure us the find us the building partners can bring that down, and let's execute. And if we did something like this, if we showed that we could build non-market housing without reliance on huge provincial subsidy, that'd be a huge story to tell. And from that, from actually getting people working together on a concrete project, I do really think that you learn by doing, and it's the right structure of how to coordinate and collaborate and bring those people together will come from that. And that is like one of the outcomes of what this pilot would be. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse anymore, but I do think that we can really de-risk the city's investment if we have milestones. It's like, okay, we'll release $150,000 to this pilot, and then there'll be another $50,000 released once you secure, say, $500,000 of external financing, and then we'll release another little bit of money once you get X amount of units to the development permit stage. And so I think that this is worth a conversation to have, but it's really what we want to create it, and we need the city to come together and negotiate with Anchor, negotiate with the Housing Working Group, negotiate with NBC. What are the deliverables? What's possible? What's the right way to go? And we need to create it. And this is just the first step of a staff report to get everybody together to have that discussion and then come back to options with council. Staff may have the conversation, be like, no, this is just doesn't make any sense. And option one is no. But there might be option two. There's a bunch of set of, option one might be there is a set of milestones. We can set up a contract. It can be done this way. The procurement works. And we can get this group off and going to actually do something that we fundamentally need. And we're falling so far behind. And you walk around anywhere in the community and there's stories of people not finding housing. I've got brothers who are completely out of the market. We grew up here. We have, yeah, you name it. And especially it's more acute for people under 40. So anyhow, this is an issue we need to tackle. And I do think we need some innovation to do it. And this is one way to kickstart it without going through overly large process of setting up a corporation and putting the cart before the horse when we can get started on something now. So yeah, there's the motion, and any further discussion on that? Oh, I see some discussion. Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. I think you have said a lot on it, so I really agree with everything you said, and I'm just grateful for the partnership coming forward today. I got involved in City Council mainly because I care about housing affordability, and something that came back to me early on was, well, the city's not responsible for housing affordability. But I think everything we've heard today is that the city is very much involved in housing affordability, and I'm super grateful for the local community level leadership being shown on this, and I think that the city has a really important role to play in facilitating and supporting this kind of initiative. So thank you, and I'm very much in favor of this.
Mayor Crow.
Thank you very much, Chair. And if I may, a question to staff first before I comment. Just to be clear, with respect to the proposed motions that staff was looking for direction on today, no motion's been made, so that would just come back to another meeting for discussion again. The recommended
motion. This motion's on the table.
No, I'm talking. No, I'm
please.
talking about the motions that are in the agenda. Please, I'd like the question.
When this motion was dealt with, Your Worship, then staff would be seeking clarification if you wish to deal with those motions today or bring them forward to a future.
All right, and with respect to the motion that's on the floor, Mr. Lindsay, does staff have the capacity, do you think, to provide a meaningful report back to council? Because this, with great respect, notwithstanding the enthusiasm, I don't get too enthusiastic about anything anymore. I've been around long enough, I don't want to pull the old man thing out of my butt today, but I've been around long enough to see lots of great ideas floated by various folks with lots of enthusiasm that don't seem to end or land well over time. Are we in a position to provide, is staff in a position, given the current problems with getting staffing, to provide some meaningful response by the 15th of July?
Your Worship, if this motion passed today, it would then come forward to your council meeting at the end of the month for consent. So assuming it passed at that point, I would say that staff would have time to bring you back a report. I will note that there's a number of other kind of motions and directions and requests for reports that are out there. So we'd probably be looking for a little bit of direction on what's a priority, because if council wants to make this a priority, something else is gonna fall off the table. But if this is a priority for council, we could certainly bring you back a report.
And that discussion could be had at the next council meeting.
Under consent, that's correct, yes.
Thank you. I'm to some extent much like Councillor Thorpe with respect to motions like this that arrive, so to speak, at the last moment. Please, I don't need to have someone sighing in my ear. I'm somewhat like Councillor Thorpe with respect to these kinds of proposals. This represents a step down a road, which is a fairly major shift for this council. So I will support it for the sake of getting a staff report, but I think council needs to consider very carefully between now and the next council meeting how far we want to go in terms of a change of philosophy. The provincial government, the federal government to a lesser extent is responsible for housing. The more municipalities step into it, the more costly it becomes for municipal ratepayers who are already feeling the burden. So I'll leave it at that. I don't wish to delay any longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm willing to support this as it stands, a staff meeting and discussing this. I think we've got some very smart people in the room who've got some bright ideas about how we can move forward, and the community is actually talking to us about this, and that's, to me, that's really important that we continue the conversation going. We have a serious problem with affordable housing in this community. I ran a shelter for several years, and I saw students showing up at the door. I saw working people showing up at the door, going into culture shock because they'd been evicted from where they live because this whole community is being gentrified at a rapid rate. And so we need workforce housing. We need to keep our young people in the community, and having a conversation about it and working towards steps that improve this situation are important. And I appreciate the people that have come out today to speak to this and to support this. And I'm looking forward to hearing a staff report if this motion passes and it goes forward at the next council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, Chair. Speaking in support, I'm really keen to support new ideas and new partnerships that are happening in community. We need it. I don't need to state that case. All of my colleagues have. My one hitch with this resolution is that it's presupposing an outcome, and my request is just for a staff report to help us explore whether this is a reasonable option. However, given the conversation we've had, and I think the kind of our understanding of the specificity of this, I'm happy to support and receive that staff report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other comments, questions. So all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Councillor?
I believe, don't we have to defer the other one back until this report is gone?
So, Chair, right now you haven't moved or considered any of the options that were provided to you by staff in their presentation. You don't necessarily have to move any of those, but if you would like to discuss them again or have them brought before you again, a motion to have them brought forward to a future meeting would be in order. If you are good and you've sought this alternate direction, nothing needs to be done at this time.
So I'll look to the committee's favor of what.
I would like to refer it till after this report, because I understand, the way I'm reading it, and I could be wrong, is some of those dollars would be utilized towards this program. So I would rather wait till we got that report, and then once that comes, then discuss all of the options at the same time to see which one council prefers. So this time I'd like to make a report to defer it back to staff, or a motion.
Okay, a motion moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Mayor Krogh. Any further discussion on that, Councillor Armstrong?
No, I just think it makes the most sense.
Okay. Councillor Earsmuir.
I guess I understand some of the rationale for asking to defer it, but like I think option A around capital support to reestablish a hub or a navigation center, and the conversation about seasonal warming services, if we can't find a hub, I think that's a really urgent issue, and I feel like it's separate from some of the other potential actions around addressing affordability. So I would be in favor of trying to at least move option A today. So yeah, for that reason, I'm not really in favor of a deferral.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Manley.
Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Eastmere. I think that option A is very important. We have in the past waited until into the fall and into the winter before we even know what's going on with warming centers. The hub was a very important innovation for this community. The location wasn't grand, I'll grant it that, but we do need to make some decisions around what we're doing in terms of navigation for people and ensuring that those that are in the highest and most complex need category are assisted in this community.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Manley. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Eastmere, for voicing your hesitation. I share it. Again, going back to my earlier comments, I'm a fan of option A. However, I don't feel like I have enough information to understand whether this money would actually move the dial around hub conversations. So my question is about seasonal warming services during winter months. If a permanent hub is not feasible, do we imagine those to be shelter beds or a daytime warming space? And for either of those options, I'm curious if locations have been discussed. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, we weren't considering overnight shelter beds, just leaving that to BC Housing and trying to push BC Housing to expand their extreme weather response shelter and their temporary winter shelter over the winter. This would be for daytime services to allow folks to come in. We don't have alternate locations identified, but that work, based on the committee's direction, we could report back with that, as well as report back with option A and what those renovations and potential locations could be and some of the strategies to mitigate impact in community depending on where it was located.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Just to follow up on that question, I definitely am inclined to want to look at option A and have some investigation into it. If we move that today and it was approved, at the May 25th, would you be working on looking at opportunities with the hub and seasonal warming services if a permanent hub wasn't feasible within the next month and a half? My concern is if we wait to move this, we're going to, then have that discussion July 13th, and it might be something we're going to do anyhow. To do it now and get on with it. So would you start working on it as soon as this was approved? Thank you.
Well, to the chair, there's already relocation efforts that are ongoing. That was kind of supported by council in past motions, and as well as community service providers. They're continuing to look. The biggest hiccup, of course, is the capital and the renovation costs. So we could come back with update information on that. And provide information about costing and that sort of stuff to give you an idea. And we could do that, within the month or so, depending on the council's direction on when to return, because that work is already kind of ongoing in the community.
Okay, to add that, what would this add, moving this today and not deferring? What would this add if we moved this in the next month and a half?
To the chair, I guess we would still come back with an update to you. Right now, the focus was on the different options and the direction that you wanted staff to really focus on. There would be a much more comprehensive update to the committee or to council about the work that's ongoing. There are potential locations, and that probably would need to be discussed under just our in-camera under local government legislation. And then we would look for direction around that too. And the costing of the renovations is going to you know, be affected basically based on the locations. Currently, you remember the hub proposal that came before you before, it included very high level estimate costs. So looking at, you know, including showers, so we could relocate the shower program, any kind of infrastructure that an overnight shelter part of that system would include, security enhancements, we included that, any other building code compliance. So it's a really high level estimate, and it would depend on the site that's identified. So we could bring a couple of sites with different funding costing options for that.
Great, thank you. Just, in fear of, I would like that focus on that, and so I would not be supportive of a deferral, looking like there's some support around looking at option A at the table, so I would vote down, I'd be opposed to the deferral and then look to move option A, somebody to move option A. Thank you. Councillor, you're done?
Actually, may I ask a follow-up?
Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, thank you. So what I'm hearing, that you will be bringing a report back, and this is to account for the almost over $1 million that are in these three funds.
Yes, that's correct. Through
Yeah,
the chair.
so all this is just for you to come back with us and say, yes, here's this is what it's gonna cost. But if we use all of it, there's nothing available for the option we just, or the motion we just moved earlier from that funding.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, this report is bringing you those time-limited option fundings and for direction on how we would want to allocate those.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hemmons. Nope. Okay, so we'll call the question on the, yeah, there's a deferral on the thing. The deferral for reviewing this again at the July 13th meeting is currently on the floor. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? A motion's defeated on a tie. So if there's alternative direction, this is the time to do it. Councillor Eastmere?
I'd like to move option A, enhance complex needs capability.
Moved by Councillor Manley. Discussion?
And I'm moving this because the need is urgent. The operators who were operating the hub have been working hard to find an alternate location with the city. I think we realize that capital support is going to be critical in order to find and develop a new location. I do want to make sure that we're in touch closely with the province on this, the Ministry of Housing, where the proposal apparently is. And I think we need to do everything we can to push as hard as possible on this, because we know it's such a critical lifeline for people, and it's that convening space where people can access the basic services and then get into the housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support because the deferral failed. I would have preferred to speak about this in the suite of potential options in front of us. However, I'm happy to see this work continue. I do have reservations about the budget being adequate and us chasing a rabbit hole without enough funds, and then we end up back at this place again while we have an interesting proposal in front of us that just needs funds. So I think our process on this is a little sticky, but I don't see a way around it. So I'm going to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley?
Thank you. I'm gonna support this as well, and I don't think we'll be spending the money until we hear the staff report back, because there's going to be clearly a bunch of different options. And I think we need to keep pressing the provincial government to assist us with this hub model. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And yeah, it sounds like this is already happening in a parallel process anyhow, and this motion will just sort of confirm council support to continue and bring back some options that we can then assess sort of our, you know, our funding capacity across the different options in relation to other things that we have cooking in the pot as well. So I support. Going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And that brings us to a motion, question period. No questions? Then who would like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Hemmons, moved by Mayor Krogh. All in favor?